Chapter 535. Old Master Hua closed his eyes. Yes, in the past. When Lu Tongjia had first married into the family, everyone in the Hua family had spoken ill of her. Whether it was him or his wife, they both liked this daughter-in-law very much. He had poise, foresight, and vision. He was magnanimous and didn't fuss about it. He was quite good at dealing with human affairs. Even after Hua Mingliang married Nian Chuanya, whose status was lower than the Hua family. Nian Chuanya came from a humble family and did not have much experience. But he always liked to compete. Hua Yifan, Hua Yang, and Hua Manzi's personalities had become like this because of Nian Chuanya's ignorance. Speaking of which, Lu Tongjia really deserved to be called the mistress of the house. After all, Lu Tongjia was able to handle all the troubles in the Hua family, including the interactions between the relatives. Whether it was his relationship with Nian Chuanya's sisters-in-law or Hua Mingmei's sisters-in-law, he handled them perfectly. Yes. Su Qingsang knew. She glanced at Old Master Hua and said, "Then, Auntie?" He suddenly stopped speaking because Old Master Hua's expression had become a little ugly. Su Qingsang's intuition told her that it wasn't something good, so she stopped asking. "It's okay, it's all in the past." Old Master Hua patted the back of Su Qingsang's hand. "Qingsang, in this world there will always be one or two people who are stubborn. It's easy for her to get stuck in a dead end. Actually, she's not targeting you. Do you understand?" "I understand. Dad, don't worry. I'm not angry and I care." She was curious about what had happened. However, seeing that everyone in the Hua family was tight-lipped, Su Qingsang couldn't bring herself to ask. In short, Jinyao's mother has her own difficulties. You're still young, don't lower yourself to her level. Don't worry, Grandpa, I won't. Yes, I know. You're a good boy. It would be great if his wife was still alive. She would be so happy to see her grandson marry such a wife. Su Qingsang didn't respond to Old Master Hua. She suddenly thought of Hua Jinyao. In fact, if anyone were to really mind, it should be Hua Jinyao, right? If Hua Jinyao didn't mind, what right did she have to criticize Lu Tongjia? She really wanted to know what had happened to make Lu Tongjia dislike Hua Jinyao so much. However, she would not easily reveal the truth of this matter. If possible, she hoped that one day when she and Hua Jinyao were close enough to trust each other, he would tell her in person. At that moment, Hua Jinyao was sitting in his office. He didn't look too good. He didn't expect the person who bribed Xiao Hong to be so calm. It had been a few days since the incident, but the other party had yet to contact Xiao Hong or give him the final payment. Was this really an accident? Why didn't he believe it at all? Yang Wenchang stood across the desk and looked at Hua Jinyao in silence. He felt that he was to blame for what had happened. "President Hua, it might also be because of my lack of supervision. I'll keep a closer eye on him." "There's no need to send more people." Hua Jinyao waved his hand. The problem was not Xiao Hong, but the person who had contacted Xiao Hong. If that person was the same person who had caused trouble for Su Qingsang, then that person might not have contacted Xiao Hong under the current circumstances. For now, you can put Xiao Hong's matter aside. Someone will keep an eye on him. You don't have to worry about it every day. But there's another matter that needs to be solved urgently. Yang Wenchang knew what Hua Jinyao was talking about without needing to say it. "You mean Mrs. Hua?" Hua Jinyao nodded, then told Yang Wenchang his plan. Yang Wenchang nodded repeatedly. "President Hua, you're the best." Was he? Hua Jinyao didn't think so. He was just good at reading people's minds. "Remember, you handle this matter yourself. Don't let anyone else do it." "Yes." "One more thing." Thinking of what had happened recently, Hua Jinyao's face was unusually serious. "Don't let anyone else know about this except for you." Yang Wenchang understood immediately. "Don't worry, President Hua. I know what I'm doing. Go." Hua Jinyao waved his hand and gestured for Yang Wenchang to leave. He took the document with Hua Jinyao's signature and walked out. He bumped into Ding Qing the moment he walked out of Hua Jinyao's office. She was holding a stack of documents in her hands. "Assistant Yang, you got another job?" Ding Qing looked at Yang Wenchang with a big smile on her face. Yang Wenchang nodded and said, "Yeah, I got another job. I'm going now." "Assistant Yang, why don't you tell me what it is? Maybe I can help." "No need." Yang Wenchang looked at Ding Qing and thought of what Hua Jinyao had said. Ding Qing could be trusted for now, but if he couldn't even trust his own brother, then he wouldn't trust Ding Qing at all. "Assistant Yang, don't you trust me? If that's the case, I'm really sad." "You're overthinking." Yang Wenchang shook his head. "It's just a small matter. I can handle it." Ding Qing stood there without moving. Yang Wenchang added, "President Hua told me to keep an eye on Xiao Hong. I think that the person behind the scenes will definitely contact him soon. So I'm leaving. You need to hurry up. Ding Qing kindly suggested to Yang Wenchang. Xiao Hong received 2 million from President Hua. If he goes abroad with his girlfriend, we won't be able to find him even if we want to. That's what I said. Yang Wenchang nodded as if he was influenced by Ding Qing's words. I'm leaving now. Take care, Assistant Yang. Yang Wenchang disappeared behind the elevator. Ding Qing bit her lower lip with a bright smile on her face. Keep an eye on Xiao Hong? She wanted to see what kind of results Yang Wenchang could get. Thinking about it, it was quite interesting. Lin Gang had been proud of himself lately. His wife was giving birth in the hospital, but all the people in the hospital treated them like servants. Recently, someone had given him a large sum of money and told him to keep an eye on Su Qingsang. He couldn't let her live a good life. That kind of thing couldn't be easier for him. Look, even Li Hong only cared about money. Now her conscience is acting up again and she's now thinking about money. Thinking that he would soon live in a big villa and drive a luxurious car, Lin Gang felt that he would wake up laughing even in his dreams. As a result, Li Hong became more pleasing to the eye. After all, if that T.Ch hadn't been smart enough to change her mind, he wouldn't have had the money to spend now. He was so proud of himself that he could even walk like the wind. When he was rich, no one would dare to look down on him anymore. He was so proud of himself that he almost walked with his nose in the air. Ah! He lowered his head at the sound of a girl's voice. His eyes lit up when he saw the person in front of him. You, oh? Isn't this Lin Gang? What's wrong? Old classmate, don't you recognize me? The woman in front of him raised her eyebrows and looked at Lin Gang coquettishly. You are Wen Fei? Looking at the expensive clothes on the man, Lin Gang's eyes widened. His eyes scanned the man from head to toe like X-rays. The diamond on her chest was real, wasn't it? And the watch on her wrist looked expensive. How come he didn't know that this classmate of his had become so successful after so many years? Yes, it's me. Wen Fei looked Lin Gang up and down. Old classmate, I haven't seen you for a long time. I didn't expect you to still be so beautiful. You're too kind. Lin Gang, who had been bossy in front of Su Qingsang and arrogant to everyone else in the hospital, was smiling like a blooming flower. Wen Fei used to be the most beautiful girl in the class, Lin Gang could only look up to the most beautiful girl in the class. He felt that it was blasphemy to even look at her. He didn't expect that the most beautiful girl in the class would still remember him, which made him feel so happy. Old classmate, it's fate that we met. Why don't we have dinner together? Okay. Hearing Wen Fei's words, Lin Gang almost forgot that he had left the hospital to go home and buy dinner for Li Hong. Okay, let's go. Wen Fei took Lin Gang to a restaurant in a 5-star hotel nearby. Lin Gang had always been a scammer and had met many rich people, but this was the first time he had been to a place like this. For a moment, he didn't know where to put his hands and feet. Old classmate, look at you. Don't be so polite. This hotel is mine now. You? Lin Gang was so astonished that his eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. Yeah, surprised, right? Let's go. Lin Gang didn't believe her at first. However, as he followed Wen Fei into the restaurant, the waiters on both sides bowed and greeted her. Lin Gang was shocked by such a scene. He kept his body close to Wen Fei's back and didn't dare to look around. Lin Gang didn't relax until they entered the private room. Wen Fei acted as if she didn't notice his uneasiness. She called the waiters over and began to serve tea and dishes for Lin Gang. She didn't even look at the menu and directly asked them to serve the most expensive dishes in the restaurant. Old classmate, this lobster from Australia was just flown in today. It's fresh. I hope you like it. Wen Fei said it politely, but the carelessness in her tone shocked Lin Gang. How come? Australian lobster? He had only seen it on TV. How could he have the chance to see it in real life? And a bottle of 1982 Lafite, Wen Fei said with an embarrassed look on her face. Old classmate, I'm really sorry. In fact, this Lafite is very famous. In fact, there are many European wineries that have better wines than Lafite. However, Lafite is very famous in China. It can't be helped. Some people just like its name. Please don't take it to heart. No. Lin Gang didn't know where to put his hands and feet again. Australian lobster, 1982 Lafite. Top French foie gras. These ingredients that Lin Gang had only heard of but never seen were brought to the table one by one. Like a noble lady, Wen Fei held the knife and fork elegantly and taught Lin Gang how to use it. She didn't dislike it at all. At first, Lin Gang felt uncomfortable. After 2 glasses of wine, he relaxed. Wenfei didn't dislike him at all. Instead, she was very gentle. She also taught him how to use the knife and fork, how to taste wine, and how to eat Australian lobster. Lin Gang's eyes lit up. Wenfei, I didn't expect that you could become like this. What's wrong? Are you surprised? Yes, I'm surprised. I still remember that your family was not very rich in the past. In fact, everyone was similar. But compared to the current situation, it was very ordinary. Yes, I didn't expect that either. Wenfei picked up the wine in front of her and gently swirled the glass. She seemed to be very emotional. What's wrong? Miss Wen, you are so good now. Why are you still unhappy? Wenfei looked at Lin Gang's red face and sighed. She didn't look as happy as before. Instead, she looked sad. Lin Gang had drunk a lot of wine, so he was no longer as cowardly as before. Even the way he addressed her changed. Miss Wen, if you have any difficulties, just tell me. I can do it. I promise I will help you. Although I can't help you much with my ability in my current situation. You may dislike me. Old classmate, what are you talking about? I don't have the right to dislike others now. You don't have the right to dislike others with your current situation? Look at me. Those people should be disliked by you. Miss Wen, what do you mean? Wenfei put down the glass and sighed. We are classmates. There is nothing to be ashamed of. I'll be frank with you. Now, I really want to listen to other people's advice. Go ahead. I'm listening. To show that he was listening to her carefully, Lin Gang shook his head and patted his face to make himself more clear-headed. After sighing, Wenfei finally began to talk. It turned out that the hotel belonged to her, but it was actually her husband's. Why did her husband give her this hotel? To make up for it. She got to know her husband by accident. At first she thought he was a poor boy. Later she found out he was rich. She didn't deserve him, but her husband treated her very well. She became a rich young lady that everyone envied. The only problem was that she and her husband had been married for many years, but they never had a child. Her mother-in-law used to push her a lot. Later, when she found out she didn't want to have a child, she began to make things difficult for her. Because she couldn't have a child, she endured it all. Her husband was a good man. He treated her very well. For her sake, he always went against her mother-in-law. However, she didn't expect that until this year, the 10th year of their marriage, she finally found out by chance that her husband had azoospermia. In other words, the reason why she couldn't have a child was not because of herself, but because of her husband. Knowing the truth, she was sad. Although she really wanted a child, she accepted her fate. She just couldn't have a child. She had a good relationship with her husband. The two of them were happy to live together. However, when her mother-in-law found out that the person who couldn't have a child was her husband, she came up with a bad idea. Her mother-in-law wanted her to borrow her brother-in-law's seed and have a child. How could Wenfei agree to such a ridiculous idea? She refused. No matter how her mother-in-law threatened or tempted her, she refused without hesitation. However, her mother-in-law was angry. Her mother-in-law wanted her to divorce her husband. Her husband loved her, but her mother made a big fuss. He really couldn't have a child. In the end, he agreed to the divorce, but he gave her this hotel as compensation. He said that she wasted 10 years of her youth, so he gave her a hotel as compensation. He hoped that she could find a man who could have a child and treat her well. Then they could live happily. Wenfei picked up the glass and took another sip. Tell me, how can I be happy now? My husband is gone. I don't have a child. My husband asked me to find another one. But he was so good to me. Where else can I find a better man than him? After a few more glasses, Wenfei cried, Why? Why is my life so hard? Why can't I have a child? If only I could have my own child. If only my husband could have a child. How wonderful would that be? Lin Gang was drunk. He listened to Wenfei with red eyes. He didn't expect her to have such a legendary experience. Don't cry. I think it's fate. Not to mention that you have this hotel. A hotel. Tut tut, Wenfei's husband is so generous. Lin Gang tried to control the jealousy in his words. Wenfei raised her head. Her eye makeup was ruined and there were tear stains on her face. What's the use of this hotel? I don't have a husband or a child. I'm still young now. But in a few years, I'll feel like my heart is soaked in ice water when I don't even have someone to take care of me. Lin Gang took out a tissue to wipe her tears. But when he heard what she said, his hand was suspended in the air. Looking at Wenfei's young face, Lin Gang thought of his secret love for her. More importantly, an extremely daring and crazy idea emerged in his mind. Wenfei's husband couldn't have a child, but he could. What was so hard about being nice to her and taking care of her like her husband did? If he could do that, he would have a share in this hotel. Thinking of this, Lin Gang's face turned redder. It was because of excitement. When Fei calmed down, she wiped her tears and looked at Lin Gang. Look at me. I should be happy to see my old classmate, but I just said something to dampen the mood. Speaking of which, you are about the same age as me. You should be married and have children, right? Looking at Wen Fei's teary eyes, Lin Gang couldn't suppress the crazy idea he had just had. Yes, I'm married. But, what's wrong? Old classmate, if you have any difficulties you can tell me. I promise I'll try my best to help you. Speaking of which, it's really unfortunate. I've been married to my wife for years. She finally got pregnant this year. But she was hit by a car last month. 2 lives. Poor me. Lin Gang couldn't make up the rest of the story, but it didn't affect his acting. He lowered his head and pretended to cry. Wen Fei looked at him with sympathy. I didn't expect it, old classmate. We're in the same boat now. As she spoke, she took out a tissue to wipe Lin Gang's tears. She saw that he was still unhappy. She patted the back of his hand. The dead are gone. You better take care of yourself. Lin Gang looked at her hand that was still on the back of his hand. The calculation in his eyes became more and more obvious, but he hid it by wiping his tears. Wen Fei, we're in the same boat now. Yeah. We can talk more in the future. Sit. I don't have anything to do now. When you have time, come to this hotel to see me. The presidential suite upstairs is fixed to my room. As long as I'm here, you can come anytime. Wen Fei's words made Lin Gang's imagination run wild. He looked at Wen Fei's face, which was much prettier than that *TCH of his. Lin Gang's eyes lit up. There's a door. Alcohol rushed into his brain and sex moved his heart. The more Lin Gang thought about it, the more excited he became. As for Li Hong, who was still waiting for him to bring her food, he had already forgotten about her. That night, Su Qingsang checked Weibo again. It was just as Hu Jinyao had said. Although it was still on the hot search list, the number of people commenting and reposting it was obviously not as many as it was yesterday. It seemed that she only needed to wait for the popularity of this incident to die down. Things wouldn't be hard to deal with later. Lin Gang and Li Hong said they were going to blackmail Su Qingsang when they were pregnant. How smart could they be? Maybe it was for money. She wasn't looking down on Lin Gang. She could tell from Lin Gang's behavior yesterday. If he didn't want people to say that he did it for money, he would have agreed to the price and the conditions of the negotiation. Are you still reading Weibo? Hu Jinyao walked out of the bathroom and saw that Su Qingsang's phone was on. He took his hand out of Su Qingsang's and put it aside. Don't read it. It affects your mood. Don't worry. My heart is like an iron wall now. Reading Weibo won't affect me at all. Iron wall? Hu Jinyao raised his eyebrows and put his hand on Su Qingsang's chest. Let me see. Why is it so soft? Why is it so soft? It's not an iron wall at all. Stop it. Su Qingsang reached out to pull his hand away. Hu Jinyao put both hands on her chest, lowered his head and kissed Su Qingsang's lips. His lips were soft and warm, with a faint minty taste after washing his face and rinsing his mouth. Su Qingsang was mesmerized by his kiss. Many things had happened recently, so she wasn't in the mood. But his kiss ignited the flame in her. She put her hands on his shoulders and welcomed his hardness with softness. Under his gentleness, those troublesome things seemed to no longer exist. Even if there was no news, she was willing to believe that Lin Gang's problem would be solved in 3 days. She would rest at home for the next 2 days. She would read books and listen to music. She would not care about what was going on outside. Every night, she would study new dishes with Ms. Yu. At night, she would make love to Hu Jinyao. She wouldn't ask him about the company or Lin Gang. She trusted him with all her heart. She believed in what he said. Chapter 536. In fact, it only took her 3 days. During those 3 days, some people were still thinking about it. Some people were paying attention to it. Fewer people reposted the post, but some reporters came to the hospital to ask about the situation. The gynecology and obstetrics department also came to see Su Qingsang. They wanted to know where the arrogant doctor came from. Unfortunately, Su Qingsang was on vacation. They couldn't see her in person. Therefore, a Weibo post said that the hospital had already dealt with Su Qingsang and fired her. But soon they received new rebuttals. After all, Su Qingsang's photo was still hanging on the wall. How could she be fired? The popularity of the post dropped a little, but the people who paid attention to it and the incident itself were still there. Lin Gang still insisted on what he said. But the strange thing was that he refused to be interviewed by reporters, and he didn't want to show his true face in front of the camera. Because he didn't want to show his face to the reporters, Two reporters from tabloids started to doubt him. They kept asking Lin Gang about what happened, but Lin Gang wasn't as firm as he had been 2 days ago. Things that were already set in stone suddenly seemed to have a reversal. Li Hong didn't expect her husband to lose his memory. She thought about Lin Gang's strange behavior these days. Li Hong immediately sensed that something was wrong. She couldn't ask in front of the reporters. After the reporters left, Li Hong started to ask. Lin Gang didn't have the patience to deal with her. He turned around and walked away. The whole process was witnessed by others. There was a reporter behind him. He was from a live broadcast platform. He said that he wanted to interview Lin Gang and stand up for him. Lin Gang didn't have time to talk to him. That reporter went to interview Li Hong. Li Hong complained to the reporter again as she had said before. The reporter got the interview with Li Hong, but he didn't publish it immediately. Instead, he chose to interview Lin Gang again. The reporter's idea was simple. He wanted the couple to cry together. That way the effect would be better than one person. However, he didn't expect that Lin Gang would be exposed. The reporter asked Lin Gang if Su Qingsang had any details about how she insulted the pregnant woman. Lin Gang didn't know. What he said later didn't match what Li Hong had told him. That reporter suddenly realized that something was wrong. That night, when both of them were in the ward, he locked the door. He told Li Hong what Lin Gang had said. She asked Li Hong what happened. Why did the two of them have nothing to say? Li Hong didn't expect her husband to be so stupid that he made a mistake. It was just a few words, but Lin Gang's anger was ignited. He quarreled with Li Honglu. The reporter recorded the entire process. Li Hong and Lin Gang quarreled more and more fiercely. In the end, in a fit of anger, she told the truth. You're the one who asked me to frame Dr. Su. You're the one who told me that as long as we accuse Dr. Su, we can get a large sum of money. What do you mean by this attitude? What do you mean I told you to frame Dr. Su? Aren't you greedy for money yourself? If you weren't greedy for money, would you have tried to scam someone and gotten hit by a car? Why would I do that? Isn't it because you asked me to? You're not the one who asked me to frame Dr. Su. Didn't you also ask me to frame him? Li Hong was furious. She didn't expect that Lin Gang would put all the blame on her. If you didn't ask me to lie for money, would I have done such an ungrateful thing? Dr. Su was her lifesaver. You did what I asked you to do? You did what I asked you to do? Why didn't you do it when I asked you to die? Lin Gang was so angry that he slapped Li Hong across the face, regardless of whether she was still recovering from her confinement or not. The reporter sitting in the ward widened his eyes and looked at the breaking news in front of him. He was so shocked that his jaw dropped. This reporter wasn't an ordinary reporter. He already had some fans on this live broadcast platform. From the moment he entered the ward to the moment he interviewed Lin Gang and Li Hong, he had been live-streaming the whole thing. From the moment he entered the ward to the moment he interviewed Lin Gang and Li Hong, he had been live-streaming the whole thing. What else couldn't he understand? The two of them were making a scene in the hospital. A shameless one at that. Li Hong was weak. She was no match for Lin Gang. Lin Gang slapped her several times. Lying on the bed, her face was pale, but she was unwilling to admit defeat. All she could do was to cling to Lin Gang and accuse him. Lin Gang even forgot that there was a reporter in the ward. All he cared about was venting his anger. Seeing that Li Hong was about to die, the reporter hurried to call the doctor. He never turned off the camera on his phone. Now, not only did Lin Gang slander Su Qingsang and a medical worker, but he also used domestic violence. The number of people who reposted the news on Weibo was equal to the number of people who had been cheated. Soon, some of the car owners who had been blackmailed by Lin Gang and Li Hong stood out. They said that they knew Lin Gang and Li Hong and that they were professional blackmailers. They said that they knew Li Hong and that they were professional blackmailers. Several car owners came out to speak for themselves, saying how shameless Lin Gang was and how shameless he was for money. With these videos and the live broadcast this time, Chin Fan was very excited. No one believed Lin Gang's words anymore. His accusation had lost its effect. He had proved Su Qingsang's innocence. Even the big shot on Weibo who had exposed Li Hong's story in the first place was completely silent. He just deleted the original post. Not only the big shot on Weibo. Many people followed suit and deleted their posts as well. Since the original post was deleted, so were the reposts. After the original post was deleted, doctor-patient relationship became a hot topic again. Many people began to reflect on whether they had been too strict with doctors. Some people even said that people like Li Hong and Lin Gang shouldn't have saved them. They should have just let them die. After all, people like Li Hong and Lin Gang didn't deserve to be saved. Why did they save them? Soon, a new topic appeared on Rome City's local hot search list. #comment on the most beautiful doctor in my heart. Many people came out to praise the doctor. Some of them even praised Su Qing-sang. Some people had seen Su Qing-sang's patients before. Now they stood out and said that they had seen Su Qing-sang's patients and that she was very nice. Blah blah blah. That kind of people. Although these people were criticized for saying things after the fact. In any case, the danger that had a huge impact on Su Qing-sang this time was over. On the afternoon of the third day since the live broadcast reporter published the news, all the comments that were negative about the doctor and Su Qing-sang disappeared. The rest of the comments were all praising the doctor. They said that the doctor had to bear the unfair criticism while saving people. At last, the first hospital of the city released an official post on Weibo. They said that they would keep their hearts and continue to save people. They would praise Su Qing-sang. They also welcomed people from all walks of life to supervise the doctor's work. They would do a better job. It was a good official post, but no one cared anymore. Instead, many people liked it. In just a few short hours, the situation had changed dramatically. Su Qing-sang was taken aback by the whole process. She had been paying attention to the incident since the live broadcast. After all, it was the third day and she was really bored. She wanted to know what was going on. She knew that Lin Gang was the key to the problem, but she didn't expect that Lin Gang would change his mind in such a short time. How could this be? She knew that the problem would be solved sooner or later, but it was solved too fast. She couldn't help but look at Hu Jinyao. She didn't believe that Hu Jinyao had nothing to do with it. Let's eat. That day Hu Jinyao came back early just to see the result. Su Qing-sang looked up at him with a strange look in her eyes. What did you do? You eat first. Then I'll tell you what I did. Hu Jinyao's voice was filled with a faint smile. It was not surprising that the problem could be solved like this. People like Lin Gang were only after money. Money could move people's hearts. As long as the temptation was big enough, he would even sell his wife, let alone tell the truth. Of course, the premise was that the person couldn't be Hu Jinyao. He was Su Qing-sang's husband. If he showed up, even if he asked someone to do it, Hu Jinyao wouldn't be able to do it. Hu Jinyao wanted to help Su Qing-sang, but he couldn't. Instead, he would hurt her. Since Lin Gang liked money, Hu Jinyao would let someone with more money do this kind of thing. Wen Fei, who owned a hotel, was the person Hu Jinyao had arranged. After Lin Gang's case, Hu Jinyao only spent half a day to find out everything about him. After what happened to Lin Gang, Hu Jinyao spent only half a day to find out everything about Lin Gang's family. Where did he go to school? What did he do? Everything was clear. Lin Gang only graduated from high school. He didn't go to college, so he opened a small shop near his home. His business was good a few years ago. Unfortunately, more and more people liked to shop in big supermarkets. Online shopping was booming again. In recent years, Lin Gang's business had become more and more difficult. Plus, he had a bad temper. His shop was not doing well, so he always thought of asking his wife to blackmail people. Coincidentally, his shop was frequented by people who came to play mahjong. His mahjong friends didn't do their jobs. Every time Li Hong went out to blackmail people, they would threaten her from behind. When they met unreasonable people, they would take advantage of their numbers. Or they would ask Li Hong to pretend to be pitiful. When they met soft targets, they would bite them. That was how he spent the past 2 years. Since Li Hong was in trouble, he wanted to blackmail Su Qing-sang. The more money he could, the better. However, before he could blackmail Su Qing-sang, someone came to Lin Gang, offered him money, and told him to bite Su Qing-sang no matter what. Not only would he earn money, but he could also extort money from Su Qing-sang. How could Lin Gang refuse such a good deal? At first, Li Hong still had a conscience. She didn't want to do that, but after Lin Gang threatened her, she agreed. However, no matter how much money was offered to Lin Gang, it was no more than 100,000 or 200,000. But Wen Fei was different. Wen Fei's restaurant was a hotel. How much money could a hotel cost? Especially after Lin Gang had a great time yesterday and was invited to the presidential suite upstairs by Wen Fei. He couldn't believe his eyes. Wen Fei kept saying that she didn't have a child, which satisfied him even more. Wen Fei's husband couldn't have a child, but he could. Anyway, his wife couldn't have a child anymore. Now she had a little girl. Look at the young and beautiful Wen Fei, and then look at his old and ugly Li Hong, who couldn't give him a child. Anyone with a brain would know which one to choose. Lin Gang had an idea after making a comparison. Of course, he wouldn't return the money given by that person. Anyway, that person asked him to blackmail Su Qing-sang, and he did it. As long as he didn't change his mind, he would be fine. However, he didn't expect to meet Wen Fei. Even though they had only been together for 2 days, He felt that Wenfei was the woman he was destined to be with. Wenfei was gentle, beautiful, and considerate. Most importantly, she was rich. A hotel was nothing compared to the 100,000 that person had given him. Lin Gang had already figured out how to win Wenfei's heart. He even started to dream about what his life would be like after he won Wenfei's heart. Under such circumstances, of course, Lin Gang didn't want his face to appear on TV. Therefore, even though he had been very arrogant before, he began to hide when he saw the reporters. He didn't dare to confront the reporters face to face. Most importantly, he thought that he would soon get a hotel, so he didn't care about the compensation. All he could think about was how to be with Wenfei and how to make that hotel his. Hua Jinyao really knew how to find the weaknesses of people like that. Maybe Lin Gang thought that it was too easy to mess with Su Qingsang. He felt proud. He felt that it was time for him to change. He didn't believe that it was a trap for him at all. It was precisely because of Wenfei's existence that he found his wife more and more unpleasant to the eye. He told Wenfei that his wife was dead, and that was what he really thought. Now that everything was over, he would soon have a new happy life. Of course, he thought that Li Hong made her angry. People like Lin Gang were carried away by success. Especially after Wenfei seemed to hint at him a few times, he felt that he had more hope. He went to a 5-star hotel every day. He was called boss, had a beautiful woman by his side, and would have a son to inherit his family. Lin Gang had fallen into such a sweet dream. He didn't think about the illogic of it at all. Or maybe it was the dream he had when he was young, or his obsession with Wenfei made him ignore the illogic. He didn't even think about why Wenfei would want to be with him, considering his current situation. That's it. Su Qingsang stared at Hua Jinyao with her eyes wide open. She couldn't believe that the problem could be solved so easily. What else? He trusts people too easily, doesn't he? Su Qingsang felt that it was a bit magical. Chapter 537. Su Qingsang thought it was too easy for Lin Gang. It's not easy. That's not an ordinary person. She's the goddess of his school. She was the prettiest girl in his class. Hua Jinyao didn't think that Lin Gang trusted people easily. He just had the right time, the right place, and the right people. All right. How do you know that Wenfei is the prettiest girl in his class? Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang's twinkling eyes, which were like stars in the night sky, and smiled. Kiss me and I'll tell you. Not serious. Su Qingsang looked at him but didn't kiss him. She thought of something else. Well, you also said that Wenfei was the one who asked her to approach Lin Gang. What if Lin Gang doesn't let her go? I said kiss me and I'll tell you. This guy is really... Su Qingsang leaned over and kissed him. Hua Jinyao didn't think it was enough, so he held her and kissed her deeply. He didn't let her go until she was out of breath. He could kiss her if he wanted to, but he liked to see her blush. Her shy and angry eyes were especially attractive. Hua Jinyao couldn't help but lean over and kiss her cheek again. Can you tell me now? I was too naive when I deleted the Weibo post that day. Later, when the news got out, I asked Yang Wenchang to investigate Lin Gang. It didn't take long to find out everything about a person like Lin Gang. It turned out that Lin Gang had been thinking about Wenfei for the past 3 years in high school, instead of focusing on his studies. But Wenfei didn't like him. This was an excellent point of use. If it were someone else it might work, but it wouldn't be so fast. Lin Gang was a young goddess and he didn't have a child. Lin Gang just happened to want a child. All the conditions met Lin Gang's needs. Under such circumstances, it was too easy to make him fall in love with Wenfei. As long as Wenfei took him to her hotel for a visit and a meal, he would fall in love with her. As long as Wenfei made herself sound more helpless and pitiful. Lin Gang was blinded by her beauty. How could he know that Wenfei had been acting in front of him all along? He was more willing to believe what he saw with his own eyes, seeing Wenfei being addressed as Boss Wen. Then he looked at Wenfei, who was dressed in famous brands and had an elegant demeanor. How could he have known that Wenfei was faking it all? This was much easier than sending people to deal with people like Lin Gang. Su Qingsang nodded and looked at Hua Jinyao with eyes that were much brighter than before. You're amazing. He was able to investigate so many things in such a short period of time, and even arrange for Wenfei's appearance in such a short period of time. Most importantly, there was no trace of an arrangement and Lin Gang believed it. This was already very impressive. Hua Jinyao's lips curled up, and there was a faint smile on his handsome face. Hugging her waist, he gave her another kiss on the cheek. Wife, please continue. Continue? Yes. Keep complimenting me. I love to hear it. Su Qingsang looked at him. She didn't roll her eyes like she usually did. Instead, she put her arms around his neck and looked into his eyes. I can't. Even if you can't, you still have to. Hua Jinyao put his hand on her waist and said threateningly, tell me. All right. You're the best. Who am I? Hua Jinyao's hand slightly tightened. How could Su Qingsang not know his special skill? She was afraid that he would tickle her, so she hurriedly begged for mercy and told him what he wanted to hear. My husband is the best. What else? My husband is the most handsome. What else? Hua Jinyao moved his face closer to hers. Su Qingsang was very embarrassed. My husband is the best. Okay. She really couldn't find the words to say. Even if she really wanted to compliment him, she couldn't handle the situation. Hua Jinyao slightly narrowed his eyes. He felt that this compliment was completely true to his name. Wife, do you think I'm not the best? His hand on her waist gently moved to the back of her waist. Su Qingsang couldn't be clearer about the reason for the sudden change of direction. Yes, I'm the best. I already said it. Nothing. I just feel that since you're so sure of my ability, I should do my best. Of course, I have to perform well. Don't you think so? Perform? Oh. Of course, he had to show her that he was capable. Su Qingsang didn't know what was going on. She hurriedly put her hand on his chest. She stepped back and kept half an arm's length away from him. You haven't told me yet. What if Lin Gang gets involved with Wenfei? Don't worry about that. She won't. Are you so sure? Of course I'm sure. Hua Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang and gently pinched her cheek. Wenfei will go abroad in a few days. Where will Lin Gang find her then? Go abroad? Yes. Hua Jinyao nodded. There was actually a reason why he went to Wenfei. Wenfei's story was fake. She had a son. Her son was born with congenital heart disease. He needed a transplant. All these years, Wenfei's husband divorced her and abandoned her because of the treatment fee and the child. Her husband didn't want to save the child, but Wenfei couldn't give up. She wanted to give the child the operation, wanted the child to have a healthy body. However, she was poor and had no money. All these years she could only watch her sick son grow up slowly. Finally, last week, she received news from the United States that there was a suitable heart source. But she needed money. Wenfei was so anxious that her hair turned white. She needed money. She needed a lot of money to pay for the operation. When Yang Wenchang came to her, she agreed without hesitation. Once she got the money, she would take her son abroad to do a heart transplant. How could Lin Gang find her? She's a poor girl. Sort of. Wenfei had a strong resistance to lying to others. Especially when that person was her former classmate. However, when Yang Wenchang told Wenfei what Lin Gang had done, Wenfei finally agreed. Speaking of which, Wenfei is not only a poor girl. She is also a very capable person. Hua Jinyao thought of the information Yang Wenchang gave him. He said that Wenfei had been busy making a living and taking care of her son. She had a good job, but she lost it. She had to do some odd jobs. She had a good temperament. She put on clothes and put on makeup. Then she would look more energetic. Yang Wenchang hired an etiquette teacher to teach Wenfei how to taste wine and how to eat Western food. She taught Wenfei how to pretend to be a qualified rich wife. Wenfei was really good at it. She learned 70% of it in one night. If she had been dining with people from the upper class, it would have been obvious. However, it was Lin Gang, so it was impossible to tell. She's quite capable. Yeah. Hua Jinyao nodded. Wenfei came from an ordinary family. She had studied business. If she hadn't been a burden to her son and her husband, she would have achieved great things in her career. Since you admire her so much, why don't you invite her to work in your company? Su Qingsang said that not because she was jealous. She simply thought that Wenfei's life was quite amazing. She was born with such qualifications and she wasn't blinded by money. She didn't give up on her son and took responsibility. Su Qingsang had a good impression of Wenfei even though they hadn't met. Stop. Yang Wenchang is the one who admires her. Yang Wenchang was the one who arranged this. After he came back, he kept saying that Wenfei was a good person and a talent. There was a tinge of pity in his words. He didn't mean anything else. He just thought that Wenfei was a rare talent. We'll see. I don't think she's in the mood to work now. Wenfei had already contacted the doctor there. She would be taken out in a couple of days. The recovery period of a heart transplant was not a day or two. If she went back to China, it would be possible for Chanyu to invite such a kind-hearted person to work for her. Su Qingsang thought of Lin Gang and Wenfei's husband and felt a little emotional. Do you think that men are born crueler than women? What are you trying to say? He was also a man. What did she mean by that? Hua Jinyao narrowed his eyes slightly. He looked as if he was going to punish Su Qingsang if she said that his plan was too much. No, I'm not talking about you. Su Qingsang worked in the hospital and had seen a lot of people die. There were true feelings in the world. But there were also a lot of people who were not good people. Some children are born unhealthy, sick, and the ones who want to abandon them are often men. Most mothers don't want to abandon their children. You seem to be talking about Wen Fei. She works so hard because her husband is irresponsible. Look at Lin Gang. His wife is pregnant, but he still let Li Hong continue to cheat. He doesn't care about his wife's life at all. After the baby was born, he had to move it out of the incubator after a few days. To be honest, it was lucky that the baby was strong and nothing bad happened to him. If an accident really happened because of improper treatment, wouldn't they blame the hospital for being responsible? Hua Jinyao couldn't answer that question. He pulled Su Qingsang into his arms and let her sit on his lap. Honey, there is sunshine in this world and there will be shadows. I can't promise others, but I can promise myself. Hua Jinyao held Su Qingsang's hand, brought it to his lips and kissed it gently. He looked into her eyes very seriously. I can promise you, I will never be like them. His voice was deep, magnetic and sexy at the same time. The determination in his eyes made Su Qingsang's heart skip a beat. She nodded her head lightly. That was the trust she had in her. Hua Jinyao kissed her lips again. She trusted him with all her heart. The expression on her face was so beautiful that he couldn't help it. Su Qingsang felt the gentleness in his kiss. Her eyes were watery. She had been married to Hua Jinyao for more than half a year. She had been learning how to be a good wife. She had been learning how to deal with the relationship between husband and wife and her husband's family. Most importantly, she had to learn to trust a person, and a man at that. It wasn't easy for her. Even though she was Li Qianshua's daughter, she was more sensitive and suspicious than others because she had been born as an illegitimate daughter. She hid her sensitivity, but it didn't mean that it wasn't there. Now she thought that she could trust Hua Jinyao. She could give him her trust bit by bit until she trusted him completely. She believed that he was behind her, that he would always stand behind her and support her. She believed in his feelings for her and believed that he would never betray her. Lin Gang's matter was over after this incident. Li Hong was a liar. She was as arrogant as she was before, and now she was as cowardly as she was now. The doctors and nurses in the hospital wouldn't make things difficult for her, but they couldn't be nice to her. Li Hong could accept that. However, after the incident that day, Lin Gang had disappeared. He didn't answer her calls or reply to her messages. She didn't know where Lin Gang had gone or what was going on. She had been starving for half a day, but no one brought her food. The doctors and nurses in the hospital didn't like medical disputes. They couldn't kick her out. However, she had made such a big fuss that no one came to ask if she had eaten or not. No other pregnant women were sent to this ward. Since Li Hong is such a troublemaker, I'll let her do whatever she wants. Poor Li Hong. Lin Gang was the only one who took care of her. She had a daughter, so Lin Gang didn't really care about her. Now Lin Gang didn't even show up. Li Hong didn't know what to do. Fortunately, the car owner was a nice person and left her some money. A few days ago, some people came to sympathize with Li Hong, and some family members of the patients who didn't know the truth gave Li Hong red envelopes. Otherwise, she wouldn't even have enough money to eat. She couldn't contact Lin Gang, let alone her relatives. Li Hong had a baby all by herself. Her wounds hurt and she had to do everything by herself. Her face turned paler and paler. Su Qingsang came to the hospital and found Li Hong's miserable condition during her routine ward rounds. She wasn't being soft-hearted. After all, Li Hong was still in the hospital. She asked a caregiver to keep an eye on her. She knew that Lin Gang must be busy trying to please Wen Fei, who was putting on a show with him. He didn't have time to care about Li Hong. Li Meilin laughed at Su Qingsang's carelessness. How could someone like her put up with such a thing? Su Qingsang shook her head. I'm not putting up with it. I'm just a doctor. A doctor couldn't just watch a patient die. A doctor couldn't just watch a patient's condition worsen in front of him. After all, Li Hong was in the hospital. If they didn't take care of her, the media and keyboard warriors would say that they were cold-blooded and heartless doctors. Besides, Su Qingsang believed that when Li Hong found out what Lin Gang had done, she would suffer a greater blow. By then Li Hong might not be able to take it. At that thought, Su Qingsang didn't want to argue with Li Hong anymore. What would happen if Li Hong found out? Su Qingsang didn't care, but she could guess that it wouldn't end well. Knowing that I'm not satisfied with the proposal, they came to you and asked you to deliver it to me? Throwing the document on the desk, Hu Jingyao raised his head and looked at Ding Qing. Miss Ding, I admit that you are capable and I agree with your ambition. However, this kind of good deed doesn't seem to be your style? They're all colleagues. Ding Qing smiled brightly. She knew that the proposal didn't pass the test again, so she didn't say anything. She picked it up and said, I'll help you if I can. You won't mind, right? Hu Jingyao didn't answer her question. He looked at Yang Wenchang and said, I agree with what you just said. There's no need to keep an eye on Xiaohong anymore. President Hua? We've been watching it for more than a week. If he wanted to expose himself, he would have done it long ago. It's just a waste of time and energy to keep watching him. Yes. Yang Wenchang nodded. Hu Jingyao glanced at Ding Qing and asked, anything else? No. Ding Qing took the document and walked out of the office. The moment she opened the door, she heard Hu Jingyao say, I have another thing that I need you to do. It's much more important than Xiaohong's. She frowned. She almost wanted to stay and listen to the whole thing. After all, she didn't want to offend Hu Jingyao. However, what could be more important than Xiaohong's? Ding Qing walked out. Hu Jingyao signaled Yang Wenchang with his eyes to check if the office door was closed. Yang Wenchang didn't understand. He walked up to check and stood back in front of the desk. President Hua? What is it? Hu Jingyao looked at Yang Wenchang and suddenly put on a serious face. Keep an eye on Xiaohong and send more people than before. Keep an eye on him from all directions. If you can, have his phone tapped. I believe we'll get the results soon. President Hua? Yang Wenchang didn't understand what Hu Jingyao meant. Hu Jingyao didn't say that. Yang Wenchang was a smart man. Ding Qing was in the office just now. Did Hu Jingyao say that on purpose? President Hua, are you suspecting Ding Qing? Yang Wenchang was shocked. Hu Jingyao narrowed his eyes. He subconsciously tapped his fingers on the desk. Hu Jingyao didn't want to use that word. Just do as I say. Also check on Ding Qing. It's best if you can find out who she's been in contact with. Yes. Yang Wenchang hadn't found anything wrong with Ding Qing in the past few days, but since Hu Jingyao said so, there must be something wrong. After Yang Wenchang left, Hu Jingyao looked at the document that Ding Qing had just given him. He couldn't deny that Ding Qing was good at her job. However, no matter how good she was, if she wasn't loyal, he wouldn't want her. It didn't matter though. He would soon find out whether she was a human or a ghost. Su Qingsang was in a good mood. The problem was solved. Su Yusin and Shi Mengwan both called to ask about her. It was a big deal, but it was solved quickly. Su Yusin was relieved when he heard that it was Hu Jingyao who helped. After the incident, the leaders of the hospital all came to the gynecology and obstetrics department to visit her, saying that she had been wronged. They also praised Su Qingsang at the hospital meeting, saying that she didn't care about personal gains and losses. They said that she didn't care about the past and treated the patients' families like family members. Su Qingsang knew that the hospital didn't want to offend anyone. She had just been in the hospital for a short time. How could she deserve that kind of praise? She didn't take it to heart. She continued to work and perform surgeries. Every day she was busy. She was busy, but Hu Jingyao wasn't idle either. She noticed that he was even busier than before. A few more days passed. Li Hong's wound was almost healed. She could leave the hospital. However, there was a problem. Lin Gang didn't show up. No one paid the rest of the bill for Li Hong, so she had to stay in the hospital. She kept calling Lin Gang and asked her neighbor to tell Lin Gang about her. Lin Gang finally showed up. He paid the hospital bill, left 50,000 yuan, and ran away after saying that he wanted a divorce. Li Hong screamed in pain. She held Lin Gang's hand tightly and didn't want to let go. She couldn't believe that Lin Gang would be so heartless as to leave her and her daughter behind. Lin Gang, you will die a horrible death. You encouraged me to blackmail you, and it was also your idea to slander Dr. Su. How dare you abandon me? You're not a human being. Li Hong made a scene in the hospital, but she didn't expect that Lin Gang would abandon them. It wasn't because of what had happened before. When Fei was a smart girl. She didn't want Lin Gang to pester her, so she comforted him a few days ago. Before she left, she told him that she was going abroad for a business trip. Lin Gang was dreaming, so he didn't think too much about it. He asked when Fei and found out that she would be away for more than a week. His eyes were full of disappointment. When Fei was afraid that he wouldn't fall for it, so she gave him the key card to the presidential suite and told him that he could stay there at night if he wanted. For Lin Gang, it was as if he had won the lottery. He stayed in a 5-star suite in a luxurious hotel and enjoyed the luxurious meals served by the hotel every day. How could he care about Li Hong's life when he was so ambitious? The money that the car owner had given him was used to pay for the hospital fees. The 100,000 yuan he had was given to him by the person who asked him to slander Su Qingsang. He didn't want to give Li Hong a single cent of the 100,000 yuan. However, he realized that he was going to have a hotel soon. He was generous enough to give Li Hong 50,000 yuan. He considered it a divorce. Li Hong had just given birth to a baby. Even though her wounds had healed, she was still very weak. She had been beaten and had no one to take care of her. Now Li Gang wanted to divorce her. How could she stand it? She didn't want to leave the hospital anymore. She made a scene in the hospital and refused to leave. Later, the security guards came and called the police. Finally, Li Hong was persuaded to leave. She took the 50,000 yuan, held her daughter, and left the hospital alone. Su Qingsang didn't pay much attention to it. For one thing, she had become a celebrity in Rong City after what had happened to Lin Gang. Many people came to see her for treatment. The hospital even opened the back door and let her become a specialist. She had a lot more patients than before, so she was busier than ever. For another thing, she couldn't feel any sympathy for Li Hong. Lin Gang had asked her to blackmail him, which was his fault. However, Li Hong knew that it was wrong and dangerous, but she still went. She had her own problems. She had only herself to blame for what had happened. She couldn't blame anyone else. On the other hand, Yang Wenchang, who had been lying low for a while, finally got the information that Hu Jinyao wanted. President Hua Lin Gang was kicked out of the hotel today. Yang Wenchang reported to Hu Jinyao about what had happened. He got off lightly. He had stayed in the hotel for a few days and enjoyed himself for a few days. Yang Wenchang felt a little guilty. It was too easy for a man like him to get all that. You don't understand, do you? Hu Jinyao smiled. The more you do that, the crueler it will be for him. If a man had never gotten something, he would never think about it. However, once he got it, he would lose it. That feeling was more painful than if he had never gotten it. A few days ago, when Fei told Lin Gang that she was going on a business trip and asked him to stay in the presidential suite, he believed her. Not only did he believe her, he even went to divorce Li Hong. Now that he and Li Hong had divorced, it was time to close the net. Li Hong wasn't easy to deal with. Lin Gang wanted to divorce her, so she asked him to give her the house and the money. Otherwise she wouldn't leave. She said that she had to take care of the baby, eat and drink, and pay for the baby's milk powder. Lin Gang was still dreaming of marrying a rich woman. After thinking about it, he didn't make it difficult for her. He gave Li Hong the money and the house. After that, the staff at the hotel got the news as well. When Lin Gang went back to the hotel, he was told that the presidential suite had expired. The staff asked him if he wanted to renew it. Lin Gang was dumbfounded. He couldn't believe his ears, so he kept arguing with the staff at the hotel. He said that the hotel belonged to Wen Fei and that Wen Fei was his friend. Why did he have to pay? The staff of the hotel were confused. Who is Wen Fei? The hotel was booked by someone else and the name wasn't Wen Fei's. Wen Fei wasn't the owner of the hotel either. When Wen Fei came that day, did you call her President Wen? We have a general manager or a boss here and they all call him boss. Lin Gang wasn't convinced by the staff's explanation, so he started arguing. In the end, even the police came. After a while, he realized that he had been tricked. Just like Li Hong, he cursed loudly in the hotel. However, he was taken away by the hotel security and the police. Now Lin Gang was crazy. He was looking for Wen Fei everywhere. Hu Jinyao truly thought that Lin Gang was ridiculous. You did a good job. We'll take it as a kindness that he took advantage of us. Yang Wenchang nodded. That was the truth. Lin Gang still couldn't believe that he had been tricked. Wen Fei was his classmate. Lin Gang went crazy and said that the hotel staff must have thought that Wen Fei, a single woman, was easy to bully. That was why the hotel staff tried to murder her. Let's not talk about Lin Gang anymore. He can't do anything now anyway. Yang Wenchang had found some important information today. President Hua, I found something about Ding Qing that you asked me to keep an eye on. Hu Jinyao narrowed his eyes. Yang Wenchang took out the file and put it in front of Hu Jinyao. Last night, Ding Qing's people ran into the people who were keeping an eye on Xiao Hong. Hu Jinyao's eyes fell on the photo. Ding Qing and Xiao Hong met in a bar again. It was a crowded bar, which made it convenient for them to meet each other and for Yang Wenchang's people to take photos. She's alert. After you said that, she didn't go to Xiao Hong right away. Instead, she went there 3 days later. Hu Jinyao stayed silent, watching Ding Qing and Xiao Hong meet. One of them took out his phone. Yang Wenchang saw the photo as well. We've checked it. There's an extra 10 million in Xiao Hong's account. Hu Jinyao curled up the corner of his lips. 10 million? That's a good price. Compared to the 2 million they gave him, 10 million was a lot. However, compared to the value of the file, 10 million was nothing. Who's behind Ding Qing? Have you found out? Not yet. We didn't find Ding Qing's phone records. She's using other means of communication. A sharp light flashed across Hu Jinyao's eyes. Secretary Ding's phone is new, isn't it? If she accidentally drops her phone or drops it into the water, she'll have to get a new one, right? Yang Wenchang nodded. I see. Chapter 539. It wasn't just Xiao Xiaohong. He had every reason to believe that the same person was behind Su Qingsang's death. It could also be done by two groups of people. One group was against him and the other was against Su Qingsang. However, Qingsang hadn't offended anyone. If the other party had really attacked her, it was mostly because of him. No matter which one it was, he did not intend to let these people continue to be complacent. When Hu Jinyao got home, Su Qingsang had just put away the clothes and put them in the room. Auntie Yu and the hourly helper were in charge of cleaning the house, but most of the time Su Qingsang still liked to do it herself. He liked to see her busying herself under the light, and he liked to see her working hard for this family. For example, a bouquet of flowers that he bought after work, or an aromatherapy night light that could help him sleep. Little by little, she left her mark in every corner of the house. When Su Qingsang was putting a coat in the closet, she turned around and saw Hu Jinyao. You're back. She walked in his direction. She had already taken a shower, and there was a faint fragrance on her body. Hugging her in his arms, his whole body relaxed. Why don't you leave it here and let Auntie Yu collect it tomorrow? I saw the weather forecast that it's going to rain. Besides, why do we have to wait for Auntie Yu for such a small matter? She used to do these things herself. There was no reason for him to turn into a lazy person who did not know how to distinguish the 5 grains after getting married. As she spoke, she heard the sound of rain hitting the glass outside. She turned to look at Hu Jinyao and said, Look, it's really raining. Fortunately, you came back early. Hu Jinyao drove to and fro, so it didn't matter to him whether it rained or not. But if it was raining, the road would be slippery. In addition, it was already night time. Su Qingsang felt that she was really lucky. Hu Jinyao liked this side of her. Even the smallest things could make her happy. The more he spent time with her, the more he realized that Su Qingsang was a very simple person. She didn't like complicated people and things. However, because she was married to him, she would always encounter more complicated people and things. He remembered that he had asked Yang Wenchang to keep an eye on Ding Qing for the past few days, but Ding Qing hadn't contacted the person behind her. Yesterday he even used a trick like monitoring the phone. If he could, he didn't want to do this. Like Su Qingsang, he didn't like this kind of thing. However, like Su Qingsang, he couldn't avoid it. What's wrong? Su Qingsang sensed that Hu Jinyao wasn't in a good mood. Qingsang. Hu Jinyao held her hand and looked into her eyes very seriously. You've been in Rong City for so long. Are you used to it? With so many people in the Huo family, there were many things they had to face. Back in Lin City, the only person who could make things difficult for Su Qingsang was Su Peixian. At the end of the day, she was still the daughter of the Su family. Su Peixian was just playing around. But it was different here. Everyone here was not what they appeared to be on the surface. Occasionally he would wonder if Su Qingsang would feel tired too. I'm used to it. Su Qingsang didn't understand why he would ask such a question. She really didn't feel uncomfortable about it. The only drawback was that he couldn't meet Shi Mengwan often. In addition to Zhuo Hongqin, there were quite a few of her classmates in Lin City Hospital. It felt good to do research together. But here, apart from doing research and staying in the hospital, she could only go to the Huo family. It was indeed a little boring. But it didn't matter. Recently, her relationship with her colleagues in the hospital was slowly improving. She wouldn't be bored forever. Really? Why didn't Hu Jinyao believe it? So what if I'm really not used to it? Can I go back to Lin City? Hu Jinyao couldn't answer this. The headquarters of Tianyu Group was in Rong City. Even if he returned to Lin City, he wouldn't stay for long. And since he couldn't leave, Su Qingsang naturally had to stay here. For the first time, Hu Jinyao realized that he wasn't so omnipotent. He had weaknesses and responsibilities. He didn't have the right to be willful. Hu Jinyao hugged Su Qingsang tightly in his arms, as if he was afraid of losing her. He hugged her tightly. This time Su Qingsang guessed what he was thinking. She put her hands on his back and patted him gently. Su Qingsang looked up at him and said, Hu Jinyao, I'm not uncomfortable. It's quite good. Although the winter here was very cold, there was heating. Although there were very few acquaintances here, she would slowly get to know them. As long as the person beside her was him, those problems wouldn't be problems. She would be good and try her best to live here. For him and for herself. Hu Jingyao looked at her fair, almost transparent face under the light. He lowered his head and gently kissed her lips. The words thank you didn't come out. He didn't need to say it. Patient, it's raining outside. Where are you going? Xiang Kaiping looked at the weather outside and found that Su Peijian had changed her clothes and was holding her bag, looking like she was going out. To see a friend. Su Peijian didn't answer Xiang Caiping's words very patiently. It wasn't that Xiang Kaiping didn't understand, but now she was only worried about her daughter's safety. But it's going to rain later. What friend can't you see tomorrow? Mom, my friend from Lin City. He flew all the way from Lin City to see me. I cannot go, can I? Although Xiang Kaiping gave her the supermarket, she still kept the shares for herself. Su Peijian patiently answered Xiang Caiping's question. What friend? You won't know him even if I tell you. Su Peijian saw the hesitation on Xiang Caiping's face. She stepped forward and patted Xiang Kaiping on the shoulder. All right, I promise you. I'll be back soon after I see him. Mom, you should sleep early too. Don't wait for me. But, I'm leaving. Su Peijian waved and walked out. Xiang Kaiping stood at the door of the villa. The door was not closed yet. The cold air outside blew in and she was so cold that she shrank. She closed the door and stood by the window watching Su Peijian start the car and drive away. Actually, it wasn't just today. After coming to Rong City, she found that Su Peijian liked to go out and play. Not only during the day but also at night. She didn't seem to want to stay in this house and she didn't want to accompany her. Xiang Kaiping asked where she went several times. But Su Peijian was unwilling to answer every time. Or she would say a few words casually. She asked too many times and Su Peijian said that she didn't know even if she told her. Xiang Kaiping couldn't tell how she felt. But she knew that this wasn't the mother-daughter relationship that she had imagined. She still remembered that when she mistook Su Qingsang for her, Su Qingsang was very good to her. Every time she got off work she would rush back. She would talk to her and accompany her to relieve her boredom. She would take her shopping everywhere and buy things for her. She wasn't like Su Peijian, who seemed to be a different person after she came. She was impatient with herself and didn't want to talk about what she had encountered outside. Last time, because the supermarket staff told her about her whereabouts, Su Peijian lost her temper. She said that she wasn't a prisoner, not her prisoner. She told her not to watch her every day, saying that it would make her feel pressured. After being scolded like that, Xiang Kaiping didn't dare to care about her anymore. She couldn't hide the pain in her heart. She didn't want to care about her. She just cared about her. Why did she say that to her? How did she respond at that time? She tried so hard to explain to Su Peijian that she almost cried. Although Su Peijian believed her, she didn't let her care about her anymore. Not only that, she also used the excuse that the staff was not loyal to her and replaced them. She knew that the people who were still working now were all old employees of the company, but she still let Su Peijian make a scene. After that incident, the group of old employees didn't dare to talk to her again when she went to the supermarket. She wanted to ask Su Peijian how she was doing every day, and if there was anything she couldn't solve in the business. Because those employees were afraid of being fired, no one dared to tell her about Su Peijian. She only found out later that Su Peijian went to the supermarket. She didn't treat the supermarket as her home like she used to, and she was busy from morning to night. More importantly, Su Peijian was often not there, and she didn't know where she went. She asked again later, and Su Peijian's temper was even worse than before. The more she said that she was just worried, the more Su Peijian was disgusted. I'm such a big person and I have hands and feet. How can I be lost? Su Peijian's words made her speechless. Xiang Kaiping knew that her daughter didn't have the time they spent together for more than 20 years, and she couldn't be close to her. Naturally, she wouldn't listen to her. However, knowing was one thing and accepting was another. That was her daughter after all. Xiang Kaiping looked out of the window. The rain was getting heavier, and the disappointment in her heart was getting more and more obvious. She couldn't help but think that if Su Qingsang was really her daughter, she suppressed the thought as soon as it came to her. She couldn't think about it. No matter how inconsiderate Su Peijian was, she was her own daughter. She was her own daughter. She hated that Li Qianxue. She took her man and her daughter away. She raised her daughter to be what she was today. Speaking of which, it wasn't Su Peijian's fault. It was Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue's fault. Xiang Kaiping thought that she should treat Su Peijian better, a little better. Maybe Su Peijian would be moved by it. Yang Wenchang looked at Hu Jinyao and his face was very dark. It had been almost 10 days since Hu Jiniao asked Yang Wenchang to investigate Ding Qing. Yang Wenchang was very patient, and Ding Qing seemed to be very patient too. Nothing unusual had happened to her these days. Not only was her behavior normal, but even her phone calls were normal. However, that only lasted until last night. Last night, Yang Wenchang's men listened in on Ding Qing's phone calls as usual. Chapter 540. Su Peixian sat in the private room. On her left sat the Huo brothers, Hu Yifan and Hu Yang. On the right were a few children who got along well with the Huo brothers. Speaking of which, it was quite interesting. Hu Jiniao had a few childhood friends including Li Junxing, Su Changlong, Wan Xianyang, Cheng Xianyun and Tang Mohan. His circle was almost fixed. If others couldn't enter, they wouldn't easily bring outsiders into their circle. However, whether it was the Li clan, Wan clan, Tang clan or Su clan, it was impossible for them to only have one brother. As for the cousins of these families, they couldn't get into Hu Jiniao's circle, so they naturally hung out with Hu Yifan and Hu Yang. Other than them there was also He Shenkai. Ever since he was humiliated by Hu Jiniao, he thought of a way to hook up with Hu Yifan. It was true that Hu Jiniao could be proud now, but who knew how long he could be proud. As for the rest of the people, they were just following the crowd and watching the show. If they really made a move on the Huo family, they would probably be scared out of their wits. Su Peixian raised the cup in front of her and gently took a sip. Her every movement had the air of a young lady from a wealthy family. She smiled faintly, her facial features beautiful, but there was a hint of grievance and melancholy in her eyes. Speaking of which, it was true that Su Peixian was spoiled and willful, but she had changed in the past few months. She was completely different from the spoiled young lady she used to be. She had the magnanimity of a rich young lady who had been carefully cultivated by Li Qianxue, but there was also a light worry in her eyes that was different from that of ordinary rich young ladies. A few months ago, Su Peixian had gotten to know He Xingxian, so she had gotten to know that employee of the Tianyu group. She had only gotten to know Hu Jiniao, but she had accidentally discovered something interesting about the Huo family. For example, Hu Jiniao was the eldest son, but he was not favored in the Huo family. For example, Hu Jiniao's position as the CEO was not as stable as others thought. She also asked about other things. The more she found out, the more interesting she found it. She was glad that she had come to Rong City. This place was much more fun than Lin City. Peixian, won't you have a drink with me? Hu Yifan looked at Su Peixian with a hint of amusement in his eyes. It was undeniable that after interacting with this woman a few times, he felt that she was quite to his taste. What? Su Peixian raised her eyebrows and turned to look at Hu Yifan. Mr. Hua, are you treating me as an escort? How could this be? Hu Yifan stepped forward and put his arm around her waist. I admire you and want to have a drink with you. How's that? Good reason. Su Peixian smiled, raised her glass and handed it to Hu Yifan. Well, here's to your good taste. Hu Yifan smiled and clinked glasses with Su Peixian. I find that I admire you more and more. Thank you. Su Peixian clinked glasses with him and downed the wine in one gulp. The corners of his lips curled up with a hint of smugness. Her charm was still there. Only blind people like Qiu Yanba and Hu Jiniao would stare at Su Qingsang. Hu Yifan was much more perceptive than the others. Mr. Hua, how about we play something exciting? As soon as she said that, not only Hu Yifan but also Hu Yang and the others stared at Su Peixian. Su Peixian enjoyed their gazes very much. Hu Yifan stared at her face and tightened his arm around her waist. How exciting. Let's make a bet. What bet? I bet that you will fall in love with me in a month. As Su Peixian spoke, she gently poked Hu Yifan's chest. She knew which angle of her was the most beautiful and seductive. She had practiced many times in front of the mirror at home for today. Hu Yifan smiled and the others followed suit. Su Peixian stood up slightly, held Hu Yifan's hand and sat down on his lap. What, you don't dare to bet? There's no need to bet. Hu Yifan held her hand and kissed it on his lips. I'm falling in love with you now. Really? Of course. Hu Yifan nodded. I'm willing to admit defeat. What do you want? Su Peixian shook her head. Mr. Hua, you don't have to coax me. You didn't fall in love with me. You're not me. How would you know? Of course I know. A man's eyes will be different when he looks at the woman he loves. As Su Peixian spoke, she reached out and drew a circle on Hu Yifan's chest. I don't mind waiting. Because I have confidence. In a month you will definitely fall in love with me. Hu Yifan looked at the beauty in Su Peixian's eyes and couldn't help but want to kiss her. However, Su Peixian stood up at this moment and quickly left his arms. Mr. Hua, I think it's better for us to maintain a sense of mystery before you fall in love with me. As she spoke, she picked up her bag on the sofa. Mr. Hua, Mr. He, young Master Wan, young Master Tang, I have to go home. Excuse me. I'll see you next time. Waving her hand, she left in her high heels. Hui Yifan almost got up to chase after her. Hui Yang looked at his brother and narrowed his eyes. Brother, do you really like her that much? It's exciting, isn't it? Why do I feel like she's not a good person? Hui Yang wasn't stupid. How many people in this circle were stupid? It was obvious that Su Peijian wasn't from a good background. She suddenly appeared and inexplicably entered their circle after only a few interactions. It felt like they knew every step of the way. But now that he looked back, he felt that it was unexpected. Not a good person? Hui Yifan smiled and turned to look at him. Are you a good person? Brother. Hui Yifan picked up the wine in front of him and took a sip. Don't worry. Of course, I know she's not a good person. He could even guess that Su Peijian had an ulterior motive. But so what? The more beautiful a woman was, the more sense of accomplishment he would feel when he conquered her. He couldn't wait to see Su Peijian submit to him. The atmosphere in the office was still very tense. Yang Wenchang looked at Hu Jinyao with a complicated expression. Originally, when Ding Qing made a move, he would naturally be able to find something on her. But when Yang Wenchang found it and recorded it, he suddenly didn't want to show it to Hu Jinyao, who was in contact with Ding Qing. Yang Wenchang stood there without moving. He didn't know how to give the investigation report to Hu Jinyao. This was the most complicated thing he had ever been since he started working for Hu Jinyao. President Hua, Hu Jinyao raised his head to look at him. Yang Wenchang's lips were pressed together tightly. He didn't look well. When he met Hu Jinyao's sharp gaze, a rare feeling of guilt welled up in him. He had been working for Hu Jinyao for many years. It had been 7 or 8 years since he graduated. During this time he got married and had children. He grew up in a happy family. His family was simple and he met his wife in college and then married her. He used to envy Hu Jinyao, who was born into a wealthy family. He was destined to be a superior person from the moment he was born. Such a person was undoubtedly a winner in life and had a smooth life. But after working for Hu Jinyao for a long time, he realized that it wasn't like that. Being rich didn't make one happy, nor did having a high social status. Ever since Hu Jinyao took over as the president of Tianyu Group, he had been unhappy more than happy. President Hua, since Ding Qing is unreliable, let's fire her. It doesn't matter who she contacts. As long as she doesn't work for this company, we won't be able to cause further losses. Hu Jinyao narrowed his eyes, watching his usually calm assistant lose control, which was rare. Give me the investigation report. President Hua, give it to me. Hu Jinyao stared at him as if his eyes could pierce through him. Yang Wenchang lowered his head and said, President Hua, I've sent it to your mailbox. Yang Wenchang's tone was a little strange. He seemed to be avoiding something, but at the same time he seemed to have some scruples. Hu Jinyao didn't look at him again. He directly clicked on the document. There were 2 audio files attached to the document. He clicked on the recording of Ding Qing's contact with someone. Yang Wenchang took a step forward. He seemed to want to stop Hu Jinyao, but then he stepped back. The audio started playing. The voice coming from the recording was very familiar. Hu Jinyao didn't need to read the file to know whose voice it was. He had heard too many voices, ever since he was a kid. This voice, his expression didn't change at all. He calmly listened to the first recording, then clicked on the second one. There were 2 recordings in total. Both recordings had the same voice and the content was similar. Under the 2 files, there was a written explanation written by Yang Wenchang. He looked at Hu Jinyao with pity in his eyes. Hu Jinyao remained calm. He raised his eyes to look at Yang Wenchang with no emotion in his eyes. You go out first. President Hua? I said go out. Yang Wenchang lowered his eyes, then turned around and left. After he left, Hu Jinyao picked up the laptop and threw it against the wall. The ultra-thin laptop hit the wall at this time, and the excessive impact caused the laptop to be smashed into pieces. Hu Jinyao felt that it wasn't enough. He threw all the files, folders, paperweights and pens on the table. When there was nothing left to throw, he grabbed a photo album on the table and was about to throw it out. His eyes stopped when he saw Su Qingsang's photo. He put the photo frame down bit by bit, then put it back on the table. He looked at the photo, at Su Qingsang's face with a faint smile on her face as she looked at the camera. He closed his eyes and weakly collapsed on the office chair. Jinyao? She had a night shift that day, so she came back a little late. She walked in and found that the dishes on the dining table were still there. She called Hu Jinyao but he didn't answer. She called Ms. Yu who said that Hu Jinyao didn't come home for dinner. She went back to her room and found that Hu Jinyao was taking a shower in the bathroom. Chapter 541. She called out again but Hu Jinyao didn't seem to hear her. Su Qingsang was a little worried. She took a few steps forward and was about to pat him on the back. However, she found that Hu Jinyao was showering in cold water. Cold showers in this weather? Jinyao? What are you doing? Was he crazy? She hurriedly turned off the water and looked at Hu Jinyao, only to find that he didn't seem to notice her coming in. His skin had turned red. His body was cold to the touch. He didn't know how long he had been charging. Su Qingsang wrapped Hu Jinyao in a towel. Hu Jinyao, are you all right? Hu Jinyao was not normal. Hu Jinyao seemed to have finally seen her. He suddenly reached out and hugged her. He hugged her tightly and forcefully. Su Qingsang was suffocated by his embrace. She didn't try to push him away. His body was trembling. She could feel that Hu Jinyao was in a bad mood. Jinyao. She called his name softly, but Hu Jinyao didn't respond at all. He just hugged her tightly. He was too strong and she couldn't break free at all. She could only let him hug her. She wanted to call him to say something but no words came out. In the end, she was afraid that he would catch a cold. His body was so cold that she could feel it even through his clothes. She tried to hug him back, tried to get him to go back to his room. Hu Jinyao, can we go back to the room? Let me dry your hair for you. She still wanted to blow on him. She also wanted him to quickly cover himself with the blanket. Hu Jinyao remained silent. He pressed Su Qingsang's head against his chest. She had to pat his back gently. Hu Jinyao, your hair is wet. Let's go back to the room. I'll dry it for you, okay? Hu Jinyao lowered his head to look at her and finally followed her back to her room. He did not speak and she did not ask him. She quietly wiped his body clean and dried his hair. He was really cold. In the past, she always liked to hug him, thinking that he was the kind of big warm woman. She felt her eyes were a little sore. She dried his hair as fast as she could and laid him down on the bed. She covered his body with the blanket but he still didn't speak. He just lay there without moving. Su Qingsang had never seen him like this. She had a lot to ask and a lot to say. But now she couldn't say a single word. Jinyao. What happened? She looked at him for an answer. Hu Jinyao was still lying there without moving. Su Qingsang waited for a long time, but he didn't say anything. She couldn't wait anymore. She stood up and wanted to take a shower. She was soaked with water after being hit by Hu Jinyao. As soon as she got up, Hu Jinyao grabbed her wrist. He pulled her into his arms forcefully. She landed on his chest and looked up at him. For the first time, Hu Jinyao saw nothing. His eyes were empty and his gaze was extremely vacant. Her heart felt like it was being pricked by needles. She couldn't help but reach out her hand to cover the pair of eyes. Hu Jinyao held her hand and hugged her tightly again. He lowered his head and buried his face in the crook of her neck. Su Qingsang thought that he wanted that but he didn't. He just held her like this. It was a very strange and uncomfortable position. She was half lying on her stomach and felt very tired. Just as she was about to ask him to let go of her, she suddenly felt something wet on her neck. The warm touch made Su Qingsang's body stiffen. Was that tears? She wanted to raise her head and look at him, but he wouldn't let her. She felt that the wetness on her neck was getting bigger and bigger. Her heart began to tremble. She had seen Hu Jinyao many times. Rascally, wise, fierce, sharp-tongued, domineering, and strong when he protected her behind him. But she had never seen Hu Jinyao cry. She couldn't move at all. She could only feel that the wetness on her neck was getting bigger and bigger. Hua, I'm in so much pain. He said those 3 words in a low voice, almost in a gasp, and it rang in Su Qingsang's ears. The 3 simple words made Su Qingsang's heart tremble. Hu Jinyao. I'm in so much pain. Hu Jinyao closed his eyes tightly, but he couldn't stop the tears from falling. Those emotions were too difficult to vent. Even if he smashed the office, he couldn't ease it at all. The pain from the accumulated problems that had existed for a long time had reached its peak at this moment. When he saw those documents and heard the 2 recordings today, he couldn't control himself at all. At first he was just confused, angry. But when the anger reached its peak, it turned into pain. It was a pain that began to spread from his heart, from his blood, and bit by bit, it permeated his entire body. It was so fierce that he couldn't resist it at all. It was really painful, very painful. My heart hurts so much. Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang hugged him tightly. It's okay. Hu Jinyao wanted to shake his head. It couldn't be okay. It couldn't be okay. How could it be okay? The tears had stopped flowing. But he still couldn't suppress the pain in his heart. He hugged Su Qingsang tightly, almost as if he wanted to rub her into his body. Hua Jinyao hugged her tightly and didn't let go, letting his emotions vent at that moment. Su Qingsang didn't dare to move at all. She kept patting Hua Jinyao's shoulder gently again and again. She rarely comforted people, so she could only think of such a clumsy way to calm him down. Hua Jinyao's hands were still wrapped around her, very hard and very tight. She didn't think of breaking free. Just like that, she used this very strange and uncomfortable position, half lying on his body. She kept patting his back to calm him down. After an unknown period of time, Su Qingsang's body was almost numb. The grip on her back finally loosened. Su Qingsang took a long time to recover. She got up and found that Hua Jinyao had fallen asleep. His face was already full of tears. It was as if what she had just seen was an illusion. Su Qingsang leaned closer to see clearly, but she found that Hua Jinyao really didn't have any tears. He was used to hiding his emotions. Even now he wouldn't let her see it. She stared at Hua Jinyao's face for a long time. His deep facial features were very stiff. Even though he was asleep, his entire body was tense. The expression on his face didn't ease because he had fallen asleep. He only looked more and more serious. Su Qingsang tried to reach out to smooth his tightly knitted brows, but it was useless. After a while he frowned again. She tried several times but failed. Hua Jinyao's brows were tightly knitted. Chapter 542. Su Qingsang was very close, but she couldn't hear what Hua Jinyao was saying. She couldn't help but lean closer. She still couldn't hear anything clearly. She vaguely seemed to be asking something, but when she wanted to listen again, Hua Jinyao fell asleep again. She didn't hear Hua Jinyao speak again until Su Qingsang took a shower and lay down beside Hua Jinyao. He didn't even talk in his sleep. Su Qingsang slept next to him. She gently snuggled up to him. His body wasn't as cold as before. However, she still felt that the temperature was much lower than usual. Su Qingsang couldn't help but hug him. He didn't put on his clothes when he came out of the bathroom. At this moment she didn't have any romantic thoughts in her mind at all. There were only his faint tears that flowed into her heart, and his trembling hands when he hugged her. She looked up at Hua Jinyao. He looked paler than usual. His facial features could really feel that even if he was sleeping at this moment, he wouldn't be able to sleep well. Su Qingsang's heart ached. She didn't understand what had happened. In the end, she could only hug Hua Jinyao tighter, trying to give him some strength and comfort. In the middle of the night, Su Qingsang was woken up by the heat. She felt extremely uncomfortable and wanted to lift the blanket, but she found that it wasn't the blanket that made her feel hot, but Hua Jinyao. His body was boiling hot, and the temperature made Su Qingsang wake up almost instantly. Jinyao. She gently pushed Hua Jinyao's body, but there was no reaction. Not only was his body temperature very high, but the temperature of his forehead was even higher. Even his breath was a little heavy. Su Qingsang quickly got up. Looking at Hua Jinyao, he must have caught a cold in the rain. She hurriedly got up and went to the living room to get the medicine box. She found the commonly used cold medicine and planned to feed it to Hua Jinyao, but Hua Jinyao didn't cooperate at all. He couldn't swallow the medicine at all. In the end, Su Qingsang could only force the medicine into Hua Jinyao's mouth, drink some water and feed it to him mouth to mouth. She didn't care if she would be infected by Hua Jinyao at this moment. She even fed him the medicine, but Hua Jinyao's body was still very hot. Su Qingsang was a doctor, so of course she knew how to deal with it. She got some water and began to cool Hua Jinyao down. She wiped Hua Jinyao's body over and over again, trying to cool down his body temperature. Su Qingsang had been busy for more than an hour before Hua Jinyao's body temperature was no longer as high as before. His fever was gone and she was exhausted. June went back to sleep on the bed, but he couldn't fall asleep no matter what. She looked at Hua Jinyao and was sure that something unusual must have happened, but she didn't know what it was. She had been taking care of Hua Jinyao for most of the night and was tired herself. She stared at Hua Jinyao for a long time before falling asleep again. What Su Qingsang didn't expect was that the harder it was for a person to get sick, the more likely it was to get sick. She had already given Hua Jinyao some medicine yesterday, but when she got up this morning she found that Hua Jinyao's fever was still there. Not only did it not recede, but it was even more serious than yesterday. Shocked, she found the medicine and fed it to Hua Jinyao. Then she tried to lower his body temperature again. But it was no use. Hua Jinyao's fever was getting worse. Not only did he have a high fever, but he also said that he had something to say. Hua Jinyao? Hua Jinyao? Su Qingsang called Hua Jinyao a few times, but he didn't respond at all. Su Qingsang couldn't go to work like this. She called Sun Huiya to ask for leave. Her tone was too urgent, so Sun Huiya agreed without asking further. After hanging up the phone, Su Qingsang saw that he didn't look good. Hua Jinyao's fever didn't go down, so she could only give him an 4. Hua Jinyao? Su Qingsang approached him and whispered in his ear, "Get up. I'll take you to the hospital, okay?" Hua Jinyao didn't respond. Su Qingsang wanted to help him up, but she couldn't do it alone. Calling an ambulance seemed to be making a mountain out of a molehill. She thought about it and decided to go to the hospital. She covered Hua Jinyao with the blanket and said, "I'll go to the hospital to get the medicine. I'll be back soon. Wait for me." Even though she knew that Hua Jinyao couldn't hear her, she still told him. After that, Su Qingsang hurried to the hospital to get the medicine. She was a doctor, so it was naturally very easy for her to do these things. She put Hua Jinyao on the floor as fast as she could and hung the bottle on the bedside table. Hua Jinyao still didn't wake up. His eyebrows were furrowed and he looked very painful. Su Qingsang got up and was about to go to the kitchen to cook some porridge so that he could eat it when he woke up. Hua Jinyao's phone on the bedside table rang. It was Yang Wenchang. Su Qingsang looked at the number and finally picked it up. "President Hua, this is Su Qingsang." Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao, who was sleeping on the bed and didn't notice anything. "Jinyao is sick, so he probably can't come to work today. If there's anything, you can deal with it yourself." "President Hua is sick?" "Yes." After Su Qingsang said that, she asked, "Assistant Yang, can I ask something? Did something happen to Hua Jinyao and the company these days?" Hua Jinyao's behavior yesterday was too unusual. She didn't believe that ordinary work could make Hua Jinyao like that. This? Yang Wenchang wasn't sure if he could tell Su Qingsang. He looked conflicted. "Assistant Yang." Su Qingsang's voice became cold. "I'm Hua Jinyao's wife. I don't know how to deal with the company's affairs, and I'm not sure if I can help Hua Jinyao. But I think I'm at least qualified to know why he's like this, right? Mrs. Hua, wait for me. I'll come over now." "Okay, I'll wait for you." Su Qingsang hung up the phone and put it aside. Her eyes fell on Hua Jinyao's face. His face was red because of the fever and his breathing was heavy. She sat on the edge of the bed and held his hand, then put his hand against her face. "Hua Jinyao, wake up quickly." Su Qingsang put down his hand and went to cook porridge for Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang had just cooked the porridge and set the time when Yang Wenchang came. He was carrying some food and medicine in his hands. However, when he saw Hua Jinyao and the drip on his arm, he felt that his actions were unnecessary. "I forgot that you're a doctor, Mrs. Hua." Su Qingsang shook her head and took the things in his hands. "You're very kind. I thank you on behalf of Hua Jinyao." "You're welcome. It's what I should do." As he spoke, he glanced at Hua Jinyao, who was lying on the bed. "President Hua, when did you get sick?" "Last night." Su Qingsang thought of Hua Jinyao's appearance when she came back. "After I came back, he was taking a cold shower in his room. It's such a hot day, and with that kind of shower, it would be strange if he didn't get sick." Seriously speaking, Hua Jinyao had always been in good health. The reason why he suddenly got sick like this might be because he had something on his mind. What's wrong with him? What happened to Tianyu Group? Su Qingsang looked at Yang Wenchang with a sharp gaze. Yang Wenchang touched his nose. He really didn't know how to answer Su Qingsang's question. "Well, Mrs. Hua, do you know why President Hua and his mother, Mrs. Hua, have a bad relationship?" "I don't know." Su Qingsang was stunned when she heard Yang Wenchang mention Lu Tongjia. She thought of what old Master Hua said the other day. Hua Jinyao is like this because of his mother? Yang Wenchang nodded. "Speaking of which, the reason why President Hua is so upset this time is because of Mrs. Hua." Yang Wenchang knew from the day he entered Tianyu Group that Hua Jinyao and Lu Tongjia didn't have a good relationship. However, he didn't expect that their relationship was so bad that Lu Tongjia hated Hua Jinyao so much. Not only did she collude with outsiders, but she also wanted Hua Jinyao to cause great losses to the company. She also wanted him to lose his position as president. She wanted to replace the head of Tianyu Group. Yang Wenchang couldn't say much about other things, but this time he told Su Qingsang about Xiao Hong's theft of the documents. "You mean Hua Jinyao's mother colluded with outsiders and stole the company's confidential documents?" She didn't really want Tianyu Group to suffer losses. She just wanted to pull Hua Jinyao down from his position as president. Is she crazy? Why would she do that? Su Qingsang's face was full of shock. She couldn't understand Lu Tongjia's thoughts at all. I don't know. Yang Wenchang shook his head. President Hua never said anything. Su Qingsang turned her head. Her eyes fell on Hua Jinyao's face, which was abnormally red because of the fever. She bit her lip tightly. That's all for now. Thank you for coming to see him. I'll take care of him from now on. You're welcome. It's what I should do. Yang Wenchang waved his hand. Mrs. Hua, if there's anything you need help with, just let me know. The company is not far from here. I can come over in a minute. Okay. Su Qingsang nodded and didn't refuse. After seeing Yang Wenchang off, Auntie Yu came over. Knowing that Hua Jinyao had a cold, she did the housework quietly. Su Qingsang had no appetite, so she ate something and went back to her room. Hua Jinyao was still sleeping. There was no sign of him waking up. She stared at his face and felt a faint pain in her heart. She really understood him and his pain. It was just like when she thought she was an illegitimate daughter, and when she found out that Su Qinghui had replaced her. The betrayal from family was the most painful. Hua Jinyao started talking again. Su Qingsang heard it, but she couldn't hear it clearly. The voice was too vague. It took her a long time to stay by Hua Jinyao's side. It wasn't until he started talking again that she thought she heard Hua Jinyao call her mother. Su Qingsang was slightly stunned. Her eyes fell on Hua Jinyao's face. Her heart felt as if it was being pricked by needles again. She had always thought that Hua Jinyao didn't have a good relationship with his mother, but she never thought that Hua Jinyao would call her mother when he was sick. She remembered that Hua Jinyao had been encouraging her when she wanted to acknowledge Li Chenxue. She didn't understand why at the time, but now she did. In Hua Jinyao's heart, his mother must have a special place, right? Chapter 543. The note on it was quite restrained. Mother. Su Qingsang looked at the two words and felt an inexplicable sadness in her heart. The call went through. She heard Lu Tongjia's slightly cold voice on the other end of the line. What's the matter? Su Qingsang closed her eyes. She couldn't think of what kind of mother would treat her son like this. Jinyao is sick. He's calling you. Can you come and see him? There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Su Qingsang thought that she didn't hear clearly, so she repeated herself. Is he dying? Lu Tongjia's voice was very cold. Is he dying of illness? If he is dying of illness, then I'll come over. If not, there's no need to. Andy, you're too much. He's your son. I know. He's my son. But there are many times when I wish he wasn't my son. After saying this, Lu Tongjia hung up the phone. Su Qingsang clutched the phone, and her body trembled again and again. She looked at Hua Jinyao. He was still having a fever. He had been very restrained when he called her mother just now. If she hadn't been guarding him, she probably wouldn't have heard it. What did it mean? It was the deepest desire in his heart. But even so, he still restrained himself. Su Qingsang's chest rose and fell violently. She couldn't help but call Lu Tongjia again. Is there anything else? Hua Jinyao is really sick. Are you sure you don't want to see him? He's calling you. Do you know that he's calling you? He wants you to come and see him. Did you hear him? I heard him. So what? Lu Tongjia snorted coldly. What? Do you really think you're the young mistress of the Hua family? Let me tell you, don't try to hurt yourself in front of me. It's useless. The sound of the phone being hung up was heard again. Su Qingsang felt that she was so angry that her face began to heat up. Her whole body felt as if there was a fire burning. She threw down the phone and couldn't control herself anymore. She stood up, put on a coat, and was about to go out. Before leaving, she called Yang Wenchang and asked him to come over to take care of Hua Jinyao for a while. She also told Ms. Yu, who was preparing to go buy groceries, to come over later. It was still early for dinner anyway. She asked her to keep an eye on Hua Jinyao. After that, she took the car keys and left in a hurry. The fire in Su Qingsang's heart was still burning fiercely even though she had just entered the room. She couldn't restrain herself. She couldn't imagine what kind of mother would be so cold-blooded. What kind of mother would ask if her son was dead? Was Hua Jinyao not Lu Tongjia's biological son? Is that so? She felt as if she had lost all reason. She just wanted to see Lu Tongjia right now. She wanted to bring her to Hua Jinyao. She just wanted to ask her if she would only be satisfied with Hua Jinyao's death. Would she only be satisfied if Hua Jinyao disappeared from this world? There was no one in the living room when she arrived. When Uncle Cheng saw her coming in, he quickly came up to her. Young madam, the old man went out today and hasn't come back yet. I'm not looking for Grandpa. Su Qingsang slowed down. Where's Auntie? In the room upstairs. Uncle Ching was a little surprised. It was an open secret in the Hua family that Su Qingsang didn't get along with Lu Tongjia. However, all the servants tacitly didn't mention it. They didn't expect that the young madam would take the initiative to look for Lu Tongjia today. That was really strange. Okay, thank you. After saying that, Su Qingsang rushed upstairs and barged into Lu Tongjia's room. Lu Tongjia was reading in the room. She didn't seem to be affected by the phone call just now. Seeing Su Qingsang rush in without knocking, she raised her head and looked obviously unhappy. Didn't your parents teach you to knock before entering other people's rooms? What happened to your upbringing? Upbringing? Su Qingsang was so angry that she almost laughed. You want to talk to me about upbringing? Lu Tongjia put the book in her hand aside. Her slightly narrowed eyes showed her dissatisfaction. Why can't I talk to you about upbringing? You really don't deserve to be a disciple of the Hua family at all. What about me? I want to ask you right now. Mrs. Hua, do you have upbringing? Your upbringing is that your son is sick and you want him to die? Mrs. Hua, is this your upbringing? She didn't even call her aunt anymore. The word Mrs. Hua was almost squeezed out from between her teeth, full of dissatisfaction and criticism. Are you questioning me? Lu Tongjia raised her head and glared at her. Her face was quite ugly. Who gave you the right? Get out. Hua Jinyao gave me the right. Su Qingsang's anger didn't grow because she was raised by the Hua family. Instead, it burned even more fiercely. Justice gave me the right. She walked up and stood directly in front of Lu Tongjia. Her face was full of anger. Anger made Su Qingsang's face abnormally red. Her eyes were also red. She clenched her fists tightly and tried hard not to curse. But it was really difficult. She stared at Lu Tongjia as if she wanted to pierce her. You said you have upbringing? Mrs. Hua, is your upbringing to abandon your own son? Is your upbringing to gang up with outsiders to bully and hurt your own son? Is your upbringing to be cold and distant to your own son? Mrs. Hua, if this is your upbringing, then I am willing to admit that my upbringing is really not as good as yours. Su Qingsang, watch your tone. Who allowed you to talk to me like this? Lu Tongjia stared at Su Qingsang with a face full of accusation. How did I talk to you? Then how did you talk to me? How did you talk to Hua Jinyao? Su Qingsang wanted to curse when she thought of Lu Tongjia's indifference just now. She wanted to question Lu Tongjia as soon as she thought of what she had done. Mrs. Hua. I really don't understand. Hua Jinyao is your son after all. Why do you have to treat him like this? Su Qingsang was really angry. Really angry. Even though she thought that Xiang Kaiping was her mother and abandoned her. She could also understand Xiang Caiping's difficulties. She understood that it wasn't easy for her. So she didn't hate Xiang Kaiping. Later she recognized Li Qianxue. She knew that Li Qianxue didn't mean to ignore her. She also didn't hate Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue knew that Su Peijian wasn't her daughter, but she still didn't hate Su Peijian. She even felt like Su Peijian was her daughter. Not only was she not jealous, but she also felt that it was normal. If you raised her for more than 20 years without any feelings, wouldn't that be the biggest tragedy in life? But what about Hua Jinyao? He was Lu Tongjia's biological son, but Lu Tongjia treated him like this? Even if Lu Tongjia didn't mention the 30-year mother-son relationship, she was Hua Jinyao's mother. She was the one who gave birth to Hua Jinyao and brought him into the world. She really couldn't figure it out and she didn't understand it. Why could Lu Tongjia be so cruel to Hua Jinyao? At first she didn't like him. She was always critical of Hua Jinyao. But now, she heard Hua Jinyao and colluded with outsiders to ruin Hua Jinyao's reputation. She could even be indifferent to Hua Jinyao's illness. What? Mrs. Hua, I know I shouldn't ask these things. But Hua Jinyao is your son. Why are you treating him like this? She thought of Hua Jinyao's current state, the sadness on his face, and the pain she had seen Hua Jinyao in nightmares in the middle of the night. Her heart ached as if it was being pulled by someone. She had never been a mother, but she was an obstetrician and gynecologist. She had seen too many mothers. So many women, so many people wanted to be mothers, but they didn't have the chance. Why could Lu Tongjia be so cold-blooded and heartless when she was a mother? Especially when that person, the person who was neglected and hurt by her mother, was Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang felt that that kind of hurt was even more painful than hurting herself. Are you saying that Hua Jinyao isn't your biological son? So why are you treating him like this? Really? Other than the fact that Hua Jinyao wasn't her biological son, or that he was an illegitimate child like her, a mistress, she really couldn't think of any other reason. When she said that, Su Qingsang's voice was several degrees higher than usual. Her tone was completely interrogative. Her voice was full of anger, confusion and accusation toward Lu Tongjia. Even though Lu Tongjia was older than her, at that moment Su Qingsang felt that she had the right to criticize her. Nothing that Lu Tongjia did was like what a mother would do to her child. She had thought that Lu Tongjia would at least have a little compassion for her. But she was wrong. She underestimated the hatred in Lu Tongjia's heart. Lu Tongjia's attitude was much more intense than she had expected. Biological son? Does he deserve it? What Lu Tongjia hated the most in her life was that Hu Jingyao was her biological son. Do you know that I really wish that I never had this son? He doesn't deserve it. He doesn't deserve it. Lu Tongjia's voice was full of resentment. She glared at Su Qingsang, and her eyes were full of resentment that Su Qingsang couldn't understand. He doesn't deserve to be my son. I don't have a son like that. Su Qingsang stood there and looked at Lu Tongjia. Her whole body went limp, and her face was full of deep hatred and hatred. She was shocked. She couldn't imagine what kind of mother could show such an expression to her own son. She wanted to ask and no. She didn't rush to ask. She just looked at Lu Tongjia with a complicated look in her eyes. I don't have a son like that. Lu Tongjia took a step back and leaned against the wall, almost powerlessly. It had been more than 10 years. The pain had been haunting her day and night. She couldn't forget it and she couldn't forget it. But what about Hu Jingyao? In the past 10 years he had done what he had to do. He went to school, skipped grades, completed his studies, studied abroad, returned home to take over the company. He became the president of Tianyu Group and got married. He had lived too well. The calmer he was, the better his life was, the more Lu Tongjia hated him. Chapter 544. He is not worthy. He doesn't deserve it, Lu Tongjia murmured softly. Her voice was low and hoarse, but it was filled with pain. That was no longer a simple grudge. That kind of hatred frightened Su Qingsang, and the anger on her face dissipated a lot. Lu Tongjia's seat was close to the balcony. She stood up and stood next to the wall. At this moment, she turned her face away in discomfort and pressed on the position of her heart. Mrs. Hua? Lu Tongjia was obviously not in a good state. Su Qingsang took 2 steps forward. He stretched out his hand to help her. Go away. Lu Tongjia didn't accept her kindness. She looked at Su Qingsang with resentment in her eyes. I don't need you to pretend to be a good person here. You and Hu Jingyao are the same. You're all the same. Su Qingsang stood there without moving. She just didn't understand. Thinking of Hu Jingyao, who was still lying unconscious on the bed, she looked at Lu Tongjia again. Mrs. Hua, please mind your words. Hu Jingyao is your son. What? Do you think my words are unpleasant? I'm not wrong. Lu Tongjia sneered. Her expression was one of mockery and hatred. It was genuine hatred. That kind of gaze was frightening. Son, I would rather not have such a son. She patted her heart, unable to hide the pain on her face. Have you always wanted to know why I dislike him so much? Lu Tongjia straightened her back and stared at Su Qingsang. Her voice was cold. Do you think it's strange that I hate him? You don't understand, do you? Why is it that even though he is my son, I would rather not have him? Furthermore, do you think that I'm being unreasonable and not behaving like a mother? Su Qingsang didn't respond to Lu Tongjia's questions. She was curious, very curious. However, no matter how much she wanted to know, she wouldn't ask Lu Tongjia or Hu Jingyao. That must not be a good thing. She thought about everything that had happened to Hu Jingyao during this period of time. Those things should not have happened to him. She had also thought that if Hu Jingyao didn't tell her about those nightmares, she wouldn't ask about them. One day when he was willing to talk, she would ask him again. It didn't matter even if he didn't want to say it. Who didn't have a past? Who didn't have some injuries that they couldn't face? She used to have it too. She was lucky that she got out of it. Because she met Hu Jingyao, the darkness in her heart was turned over. But Hu Jingyao didn't have nightmares in the middle of the night. He was still suffering. Looking at Lu Tongjia now, she really wanted to know. She didn't want to see Hu Jingyao suffer like he did now. She watched as he lost his usual high-spirited demeanor. She watched as he felt pain because of the hurt from his family. Her heart ached. What? Her voice was very soft, as if she was afraid to disturb Lu Tongjia's desire to talk. Lu Tongjia stood up straight and moved away from the wall. Step by step, she walked to the sofa in the room and sat down again. Her gaze was fixed on an unknown point in the void. The hatred in her eyes was very obvious, but there was also a bit of blankness and emptiness that she herself did not notice. Because I hate him. You don't know how much I hate him. Lu Tongjia's eyes were red when she said this. There were tears in her eyes, and the emotions in her eyes were tumbling. He killed my son, he killed my daughter. He was so vicious when he was so young. At that time I really thought that I would rather not have this son. Su Qingsang's eyes widened. For a moment she thought that there was something wrong with her ears. What did you say? Ha! Lu Tongjia looked at her with a bit of disdain in her eyes. Su Qingsang, haven't you thought about it? The Hua family is such a big family. Other than me and Hua Jinyao's father, Su Qingsang blinked, as if she just remembered it at that moment. Hua Mingliang had 2 sons and a daughter, and Hua Mingmei had a son and a daughter. She had heard from Hua Jinyao that his granduncle Hua Yangyuan had 2 sons. She had heard from Hua Jinyao that his granduncle Hua Yangyuan had 2 sons. The elder son had a son and a daughter, and the younger son had 2 sons. His grandaunt Hua Yangxiu had 3 sons. Almost all of the previous sons had 2 sons. It seemed that Hua Mingguang and Lu Tongjia were the only ones in the entire Hua family who had only 1 child. A big family like the Hua family, especially a family that thought that having many children was a blessing, didn't seem to be normal. Su Qingsang's heart was suddenly in her throat. She looked at Lu Tongjia, her mind full of doubts. In addition to the doubts, she inexplicably had a bad feeling. She suddenly didn't dare to face what Lu Tongjia was going to say next. It wasn't that she didn't believe Hua Jinyao, but she knew that it must be a very painful past. Lu Tongjia seemed to see the fear on Su Qingsang's face. She sneered, and the hatred in her eyes didn't diminish at all. Instead, because of the bad things that had happened, her face was quite ugly. She closed her eyes. Her eyes were a little red. It wasn't a good thing for her to be too emotional. She raised her hand to cover her heart. She gently breathed to calm herself down. Su Qingsang didn't rush her, nor did she rush her. She was waiting for Lu Tongjia to calm down. It was impossible for Lu Tongjia to calm down. It had been more than 10 years and she still hadn't calmed down. She looked somewhere and her expression was a bit nostalgic. I had 3 children. Before Hua Jinyao, he had an older brother named Hua Jinkai. After him, he had a younger sister named Hua Wushuang. When Lu Tongjia said the name Hua Wushuang, tears fell from the corners of her eyes. Her daughter, the daughter she had wanted for so long. Until now, the pain of losing her son and daughter had been tormenting her day and night at all times. The more she felt sad, the more she hated Hua Jinyao, and the more she couldn't forgive him. But they were all killed by Hua Jinyao. That's impossible. Su Qingsang's voice was very soft, almost whispering. She had been married to Hua Jinyao for almost a year. She knew what kind of person Hua Jinyao was. She believed that Hua Jinyao would never hurt his brothers and sisters. Impossible? Lu Tongjia sneered, and the hatred in her eyes became more and more obvious. She also hoped that it was impossible. She also hoped that Hua Jinyao didn't say and do those things at that time. But in fact, Lu Tongjia could be said to have lived a very happy life. Her starting point was much higher than the average person's. The Lu family was considered a respectable family in Rong City. Although it wasn't as rich as the Hua family or even the Li family, it was still the only daughter of the Lu family. But as the only daughter of the Lu family, she was also spoiled since she was a child. Her father, mother, and brother all doted on her and followed her lead. When she grew up and went to college, she met Hua Mingguang by chance. Hua Mingguang was the eldest son of the Hua family. He took over the family business at an early age, and his every move was like a successful man. Lu Tongjia fell in love with Hua Mingguang at first sight. Luckily, Hua Mingguang liked her too. For Lu Tongjia, this was the best piece of news she could have ever heard. The two of them decided to get married not long after they started dating. Old Master Hua was not picky about family background. Not to mention that Lu Tongjia's family background was not bad. They were a good match and the two of them had feelings for each other. Moreover, the Hua family was strict. Old Master Hua was very loyal to his wife, and used this to restrain his children. Even though Lu Tongjia was only a college student at that time, she felt quite happy. Before she graduated, Lu Tongjia married Hua Mingguang. Not long after she graduated, she gave birth to her eldest son, Hua Jinkai. She firmly sat on the position of the young madam of the Hua family. Less than 2 years after she gave birth to Hua Jinkai, she gave birth to Hua Jinyao. At that time she and Hua Mingguang were very close. But after giving birth to 2 sons, she was a little unsatisfied. She liked daughters and so did Hua Mingguang. She wanted to have another daughter, but for several years she didn't get her wish. When Hua Jinyao was 8 years old, she finally got pregnant again. Lu Tongjia prayed to her grandparents, prayed to God, and prayed to Buddha. She only hoped that the child in her belly was a daughter. After all, she had 2 sons and she really wanted a daughter. She also felt that she was really lucky. Whatever she asked for came. She wanted a daughter and a daughter came. That year Lu Tongjia gave birth to 3 children. 11-year-old Hua Jinkai, 9-year-old Hua Jinyao, and a newborn daughter. She had a son and a daughter and a husband who loved her deeply. Her father-in-law and mother-in-law were both kind. They never said anything about making things difficult for the younger generation. Lu Tongjia really felt that she was the happiest person in the world. Especially Hua Wushuang. She wasn't as naughty as Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinyao when they were young. Hua Wushuang perfectly combined the advantages of her parents' appearance. She was cute and cute. She liked to call her mother and brother in a childish voice. She was both obedient and sensible. Lu Tongjia really felt that her life was perfect. But who knew? Accidents always came so quickly. Sometimes she wondered if God saw that the first half of her life was too good and too smooth, so he wanted her to suffer some hardships. That kind of suffering was almost fatal to her. When Hua Jinyao was 12 years old Master Hua's wife suddenly passed away. Her death was so sudden that no one expected it. After all, the old lady seemed to be such a healthy person. Like old Master Hua, the old lady was kind and benevolent. As soon as she passed away, all her children and grandchildren were sad. Plus, the Hua family status in Rong City. Many people came to pay their respects. Some of them were business people, some were relatives and friends of the Hua family, and some had benefited from the Hua family in the past. They wanted to burn incense for the old lady. Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinyao were fine. They were both teenagers and had grown up. Naturally, they could keep watch. But Hua Wushuang was different. She was less than 4 years old. How could she stand watching for the whole day? She stayed in the morning hall. Besides, there were so many people and they could only hear the sad sounds every day. It was inevitable that she was scared, so she cried every day. Later, her voice became hoarse from crying. Lu Tongjia felt sorry for her daughter, and old Master Hua also felt sorry for his granddaughter. At that time, Hua Manzi was already born. But Hua Wushuang was very cute and sweet. She had lived with old Master Hua since she was a child, so their relationship was naturally special. Old Master Hua loved his granddaughter, so he asked her not to keep watch every day. Every time a guest came to pay their respects, he asked the nanny to carry Hua Wushuang out. Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinyao couldn't avoid it. After 7 days of watching, the 2 brothers lost a lot of weight. When the old lady's funeral was over, Hua Wushuang, who couldn't go out and was always locked up at home, was bored. She was still too young to understand what death meant. She only felt that, like her mother said, her grandmother had gone to another world. That world was called heaven, and heaven was beautiful. When the funeral was over, Hua Wushuang couldn't sit still anymore. She begged Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinyao to take her out to play. Both of them loved their little sister very much. They also thought that Hua Wushuang had been locked up at home during this period of time. The 2 brothers didn't think too much about it. Plus, they always took Hua Wushuang out to play. Their family didn't worry about it. At that time, Hua Jinkai was already 14 years old. He was more than 1.7 meters tall and didn't look like a child. Hua Jinyao was the same. Although he was only 12 years old, he was already 1.6 meters tall. The 2 brothers took Hua Wushuang out together. Hua Wushuang was only a little over 4 years old. Her favorite thing was to go to the amusement park and play on the merry-go-round. Naturally, the 2 brothers agreed to their little sister's request. The 3 siblings went to the amusement park together. The 2 brothers accompanied Hua Wushuang to play on the merry-go-round 3 times. When they were about to leave, Hua Wushuang saw the pictures on the haunted house. Although she was small, she was very brave. No matter how Hua Jinyao tried to persuade her, she decided to go to the haunted house. Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinyao were both grown up, so they weren't afraid. Therefore, the 2 of them held Hua Wushuang's hand and walked into the haunted house together. However, as soon as they entered the haunted house, an accident happened. Hua Jinkai and his sister always went out with a chauffeur. Hua Wushuang liked to be comfortable, so every time she went out, she would take the RV. There was a refrigerator in the car and there were all kinds of snacks and drinks for her. It was also convenient for her to lie down in the car and rest when she was tired. The Hua family had a high status and reputation in Rong City. Coupled with their relationship with Hua Yangyuan and Hua Yangxiu, ordinary people didn't dare to mess with them. However, that day Hua Jinkai and his sister were unlucky. A fugitive happened to escape to Rong City. This man had just committed robbery and murder in a neighboring city. The leader of the gang was called Da, who was a national A-level wanted criminal. He was a national wanted criminal, so he naturally wanted to run away as soon as possible. However, before he ran away, he wanted to do one more job and make some money before leaving. Before he came, he had already gathered a few people who were not afraid of death like him. They all had criminal records. The four of them decided to do something big together. When the time came, they would escape to the ends of the earth. At that time, they had already been in Rome City for a few days, and they were living a life of hiding. They hadn't thought about what they were going to do. Chapter 545. At that time, the amusement park was much more prosperous than it was now. At that time, Rome City had just been developed, and the amusement park was built in the suburbs. There were also some undeveloped bungalows nearby. De and his three accomplices were hiding in one of the bungalows. When the Hua family's RV was parked in front of the amusement park, one of Da's accomplices, Liang, happened to come out to buy cigarettes. He saw it immediately. After all, the brand of the RV was so big that it was very eye-catching. Not only the RV, but also the three children of the Hua family, who were dressed in fancy clothes. The man's eyes lit up when he saw the RV, which was worth millions of yuan. He went back and told Da about it, and they all felt that their chance had come. They looked at the young masters and young ladies who were so weak. No matter who it was, they had kidnapped them. Why couldn't they just ask their parents to pay the ransom? How rich could they be if they could drive their children out of the amusement park in a RV? They were all outlaws and daring, so they wanted to do it right away after making the decision. Thinking of what they had seen, they became even more daring. They made up their minds almost immediately. They had to do it right away. After all, the longer they waited, the more trouble it would cause. They didn't take Hu Jinkai's group seriously. They were just a few kids. They had been staying at the amusement park for the past few days, using the tourists to cover his tracks. When he heard the news from Liang, he immediately made a plan. He was a person with a criminal record. This time he had made thorough preparations. After making the plan, they bought tickets and entered the amusement park. Da was in charge of the plan and the other three acted. They were still thinking about how to kidnap the kids first. Unexpectedly, the young masters and young ladies went into the haunted house by themselves. Da felt that it was like someone had sent him a pillow when he wanted to take a nap. He immediately changed his plan. He decided to do it in the haunted house. Therefore, when Hu Jinkai and the others entered the haunted house, Hu Wushuang was curious about the ghosts inside. Then she was scared. She was scared, and soon after she cried and begged to go out. The two brothers of the Hua family of course wanted to take her out immediately. What they didn't expect was that two more ghosts suddenly appeared in front of the three of them. Hu Wushuang and Hu Jinkai were both taken aback by her sudden appearance. Just as he was about to leave, he didn't expect two more ghosts to appear behind him. The two brothers didn't expect the haunted house to be so realistic. They looked at Hu Wushuang, who was crying because of the appearance of these ghosts. The two brothers were very nervous. They coaxed Hu Wushuang while thinking of taking her away. Neither of them had thought that these ghosts were actually villains in disguise. All they wanted to do was to comfort their little sister. However, while the two brothers were coaxing them, Da and the other three who had been standing behind them easily knocked them out. Because all of this had happened in the haunted house, and it had happened in the dark corner. Therefore no one noticed it at all. Even if someone noticed it, they would only think that it was a prank from the amusement park. Who would have thought that there would be someone so crazy on such a bright day? Da and the other three brought Hu Jinkai and the others out of the amusement park. They hadn't gone far yet. The most dangerous place was also the safest place. They were very familiar with the area, and the nearby bungalow was going to be demolished sooner or later. Not many people walked this way, so the four kidnappers brought the Hua siblings back to the bungalow. Da was a ruthless man. He was wanted all over the country because he had killed many people. Now that he was going to make money, he wouldn't let the little fat sheep he had his eyes on escape. He tied up the three siblings tightly and gagged their mouths. He didn't give them a chance to scream or run away. It was so easy that Da didn't feel any sense of accomplishment. Da was a man of experience. No matter what, he was an experienced man. He wouldn't let things go wrong at the last moment. He asked his three men to keep an eye on the Hua siblings, while he tried to find out the identity of these children. Of course he didn't need to. When they woke up, he would be able to find out everything. However, Da didn't like to do things that he wasn't sure of. It was better to find out the truth. He searched the three of them. It was a coincidence that the two brothers went out to play with their sister. They didn't bring their phones because they said they were going out to play with their sister. Only Hu Jinyao had an SLR camera with him to take pictures of his sister. Da casually rummaged through it and found a family photo of his family. Some of them were taken at a banquet held by his family. They didn't know Hua Mingguang, but someone else did. The Hua family had published an obituary about the old lady's death. His other man, Qin Si, was a native of Rong City. He not only knew Hua Mingguang, but he also knew that he was the richest man in Rong City. He was a super rich man. Putting everything else aside, the Hua family was the one who was planning to develop the undeveloped bungalows. Qin Si looked at the photo and told him who Hua Mingguang was. He was overjoyed. He felt that this was a gift from the heavens. He thought he would kidnap a random child, but he didn't expect to kidnap the Hua family, the richest man in Rong City. The richest man in Rong City. How much money did he have? He felt that he couldn't just let it go. He just wanted to ask for some ransom, but it seemed that it wouldn't work. He had to extort a large sum of money from the Hua family so that they could live comfortably for the rest of their lives. The four of them discussed. 10 million was too little. They thought that a family like the Hua family would at least have a few hundred million. It was too easy to give them 100 million to spend. It was even more ruthless. 3 lives. 50 million each. 150 million for 3 children. With a target, the next step was much easier. Do was an experienced man, so he made the next plan as soon as possible. He asked Qin Si to buy a few anonymous SIM cards, and then he used the SLR camera to take pictures of Hu Jinyao and his sister. If these rascals didn't wake up, she would send this photo to the Hua family. After that, De felt that this bungalow wasn't the most suitable place. After all, they didn't have much time. If he wanted to avoid being discovered by the Hua family, he had to stay far away. It was a coincidence. Less than an hour to the east of the amusement park was the coastline of Rong City. There were many newly built ports there. De planned to pick a port and stay there. When the money came, he would take it and leave. Chapter 546. The 3 siblings were taken to a car. De directly took these important hostages to a warehouse on the dock. As soon as they arrived, they dropped them off. Hua Jinkai woke up. He was a few years older than the others, and his body was in better shape than that of an average teenager. As soon as he woke up, he noticed that something was wrong. Looking at his brother and sister lying unconscious on the ground, he instantly realized what was going on. Hua Jinkai was shocked. His great-uncle was the governor of the province, and his uncle was the commander of the military. He couldn't believe that someone would dare to kidnap the children of the Hua family. Who are you? Don't you know who we are? Let us go. Hua Jinkai was 14 years old, and he was Old Master Hua's favorite grandson. He had been taught by Old Master Hua and Hua Mingguang since he was a child, and he had an air of maturity that far exceeded that of an average 14-year-old. Back in school, he had always been able to convince his classmates with that kind of expression. However, he didn't know that the people he was facing now were not his classmates, nor were they the employees of his father's company. Instead, they were a group of vicious criminals who were ready to run for their lives. Hey kid, you're quite arrogant. De looked at Hua Jinkai and snorted. Let you go? Yes. It's not that I can't let you go. Ask your father to bring me the money. Hua Jinkai understood what was going on. These people wanted money. He glanced at them and saw that, except for Da, the other 3 kidnappers were all masked. This made him sigh in relief. The fact that they were masked meant that they didn't want to kill them. They were safe for the time being. What? Are you scared? Scared? De took out his phone and stood in front of Hua Jinkai. Come on, tell me your father's number. Hua Jinkai stared at the phone in his hand without saying a word. De didn't get angry. He punched him in the chest. Kid, what's wrong? Arrogant? Let me tell you, it's useless. Don't try to be arrogant in front of me. If you don't want to die, do as I say or I won't mind making you suffer. Hua Jinkai gritted his teeth and glared at Da. Although he didn't want to, he didn't have a better option. This group of people could not guarantee that they would not harm them. But, if he didn't say, while he was still hesitating, he was hit in the back again. Tell me, what's the number? Hua Jinkai thought about it for a moment, then told the Hua Mingguang's number. As he reported, he observed the surrounding environment and their current situation, thinking that if it was possible, he must find a way to escape. In the past, Hua Mingguang always had his cell phone with him. For some reason, he didn't answer the phone right away. De thought that Hua Jinkai was lying to him, so he punched him again. Brat, are you messing with me? Hua Jinkai was only 14 years old, so he couldn't help but cry out in pain. His voice also woke Hua Jinyao up. Like Hua Jinkai, Hua Jinyao realized the situation he was in as soon as he woke up. At the same time, he saw Da attacking Hua Jinkai. Stop, who are you? Stop it right now. Who allowed you to hit him? Stop it right now. Hua Jinyao and Hua Jinkai were only 2 years apart in age and they had always been close. Now that he saw his older brother being beaten, how could he stand it? Even though his hands and feet were tied up, he began to struggle. He had been lying on the ground all along. At this moment he found an opportunity to kick Da with both feet. Although he was small and weak, Hua Jinyao's kick still interfered with Da's movements. Da staggered under Hua Jinyao's kick, almost losing his balance. When she came back to her senses, she was immediately annoyed. She raised her foot and kicked Hua Jinyao's small body. Hua Jinyao was kicked so hard that he rolled a couple of times and hit the leg of a nearby table before he stopped. His back hit the leg of the table and his whole body curled up in pain. "You little bastard. How dare you? Do you think I won't kill you? Let me tell you, I have 3 hostages in my hands. Don't mess with me or I'll kill 2 of you and leave 1 alive." Da was a fugitive and human lives were nothing to him. After threatening Hua Jinyao, he turned to look at Hua Jinkai and knocked him on the head with his phone. "You little bastard, if you don't want to die, ask your father to bring you money. Otherwise..." He pulled out a gun from his back pocket and pointed it at Hua Jinkai's head. "Grandpa, I don't mind sending you to hell." Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinyao didn't expect it to have a gun. Hua Jinkai and Hua Jinyao were both stunned. That was a real gun, a real one. Hua Jinyao's body was still hurting from Da's kick. The places where he had been kicked and hit the leg of the table hurt even more. Apart from the pain, he was also worried and anxious. When he saw his sister lying on the ground, Hua Jinyao clenched his teeth so hard that they almost broke. He and Hua Jinkai were both grown up, but what about his sister? She was still so young. Hua Jinkai had no choice but to give Da the number of the Hua family's old house. Da took the phone and went to make the call. Hua Jinyao curled up his body and endured the pain. He began to think about how he could get out of this. Unlike Hua Jinkai, he had loved to play since he was a child. Plus he was close to Zhang Yichen. Although Zhang Yichen was a few years older than him, the two of them got along very well. When Hua Jinkai was learning how to manage the family business, he had gone to the army with his great-aunt 2 or 3 times. He had thought about it before. Since Hua Jinkai was in the Hua family now, he could just be an idler. When he grew up, he would join the army as well. He would become a soldier like his uncle and uncle. Da took out the phone and let Hua Jinkai make the call. Hua Jinyao began to observe the surroundings. He had been in the army with Zhang Yichen many times. He loved listening to his uncle talk about how they went on missions. He was only 12 years old. But he was very smart. He had already begun to analyze the situation at hand. Da was masked, but the other 3 weren't. That meant that the other 3 were afraid of being recognized and accused. But Da wasn't afraid. What did that mean? Either Da was the boss or Da was the errand boy. He was the one who was sacrificed. Based on his experience, that man had to be the boss. He wasn't afraid of being accused. What did that mean? Although Hua Jinyao was young, he had heard a lot. He suddenly had a very bad feeling. This man was going to kill them. Even if they got the money, they might kill the hostages. That thought came to him. Hua Jinyao couldn't sit still. He looked up at Hua Jinkai. He was looking back at him. The 14-year-old boy had a calmness that didn't belong to his age. Hua Jinyao was thinking about the same thing. After so many years, the 2 brothers had developed a tacit understanding. They looked at each other and understood what the other was thinking. What happened today was not going to end well. Hua Jinyao's eyes darted around. He knew the lives of the 3 siblings. If something went wrong today, they would have to give up their lives here. Brother Da made a phone call and came straight here. He didn't hang up. Instead, he put the phone in front of Hua Jinkai and said, "Kid, your dad wants to hear your voice." Hua Jinkai didn't want to talk. He didn't want his parents to let the kidnappers get away with it. He was hit again. Hua Mingguang, who was on the phone, heard the muffled sound. Hua Mingguang immediately became nervous. There was no reason not to agree to the kidnappers' demands. But Da and the others asked for cash. That would be too difficult for him. Even if the Hua family was rich, there was no reason for them to keep so much cash at home. Hua Mingguang asked Da for at least a few days to prepare the money. Da didn't hesitate. 2 days. I'll give you 2 days to get the money. If you don't see the money in 2 days, don't blame us for being rude. 2 days is too little. Besides, tomorrow is Sunday. The bank's VIP account department doesn't work. Can't you make an exception? 3 days. 3 days at most. If you keep arguing, I'll kill one of them right now. Da ignored him and hung up the phone. After hanging up, Liang, one of Da's men, was confused. Da, how can you give them 3 days? What if they call the police? Don't worry. They won't find us here. Even 30 days won't help, let alone 3 days. There was a reason why Da said that. He had been observing the port for a long time. It was the one closest to the center and the oldest one. It had been proposed to be renovated in the first place. Later, a new port had been built in front of it, so it had been left unused. The port was far from the city and Rome City was so big. It wouldn't be easy for them to find them. Da, you're the best. Wang Ming looked at Da in admiration. So, in a few days we'll have money to spend? Of course. Da glanced at Huo Jinkai and Huo Jinyao as he spoke. Now they just had to wait for the Huo family to deliver the money to them. Thinking of the days when they would have money to spend, Da and the others began to dream of spending money like it was water and becoming the best in the world. Lu Tongjia didn't expect that. She had only rested in her room for a while. When she woke up, all 3 of her children had been kidnapped. What was even more unexpected was that while she was frantically searching for people to save the 3 children, 2 of the 3 children had already left her forever. 3 days. To her, those 3 days of torment felt like a year. She was a mother. What she cared about the most was her children. Chapter 547. Lu Tongjia still couldn't forget the scene when she saw her 4-year-old daughter lying in a pool of blood. Her face was covered with wounds. She was no longer the beautiful and adorable little princess she used to be. How could her daughter be in such a sorry state? If the police hadn't given her the DNA report, if she hadn't recognized her child, she wouldn't have admitted that her child had ended up like that. She almost wanted to die with Huo Wushuang. Huo Jinkai, the eldest son she had always been proud of, had also died with Huo Wushuang. When Huo Jinkai died, he held Huo Wushuang tightly in his arms, like a protector. Even so, he couldn't save Huo Wushuang's life. Huo Jinkai's body was also covered with wounds, including knife and gun wounds. He was only 14 years old. 14 years old. His grades were excellent and he had just been admitted to the best high school in Rong City. Although he was young, he was quite knowledgeable. Everyone in the family regarded him as the future of the entire Huo family. But now, he was dead. He had died in such a horrible and painful way. Lu Tongjia couldn't control her emotions. She screamed and lost control of her emotions. When she was sure that the 2 children were her, she almost fainted. But she couldn't. She had another child. Where was that child? Where's Jinyao? Where's Jinyao? Lu Tongjia looked around for Huo Jinyao. She had already prepared for the worst. Would Huo Jinyao also? She didn't dare to think about it. She looked around, trying to find her son. He might be the only child alive. Even though the probability was low, as long as there was a chance, Lu Tongjia wouldn't give up. Lu Tongjia was very happy that Huo Jinyao wasn't dead. When she saw Huo Jinyao, who looked extremely weak in the warehouse, she almost burst into tears of joy. Her tears of joy didn't last long. When the criminals were arrested and Lu Tongjia read their confessions, she couldn't believe her eyes. Do you know why his brother and sister are dead, but Huo Jinyao is still alive? Lu Tongjia suddenly snapped out of her reverie. She stared at Su Qingsang's face with a hint of embarrassment in her eyes. Su Qingsang had never thought that such a thing would happen to a family like the Huo family. She shook her head and suddenly didn't want to hear what Lu Tongjia had to say next. Because he told the kidnappers that he was the most important child in the Huo family. He said that he was the one the elders of the Huo family doted on the most. He beat up his brother himself to make the kidnappers believe that he didn't hurt him. Do you believe it? He's only 12 years old, yet he's so vicious. He beat his brother and even his sister. He convinced the kidnappers to believe him. Then, because the other 2 hostages were no longer useful, they were killed. Su Qingsang's eyes widened. How is that possible? Impossible, she didn't believe it. Impossible? I hope it's fake too. I also hope that it was all a bad dream. When I woke up, I still had a son and a daughter. I still had 3 adorable and precious children. Not like this. She suddenly became serious and stared at Su Qingsang's face. Why do you think I hate him? He was willing to sacrifice his own brother and sister for his own survival. He could watch his brothers and sisters die to protect himself. He could hurt them himself. Lu Tongjia's voice was choked with sobs. She clutched her heart. It had been more than 10 years and it hadn't stopped for a moment. They were his family. His dearest brother, his dearest sister. But he couldn't watch them die like that. Lu Tongjia closed her eyes. Tears flowed down her cheeks. At that time, I really wished that I didn't have this son. Well? Su Qingsang didn't know what to say. She didn't know what happened back then. However, Lu Tongjia didn't seem to be lying. Have you ever thought that there might be a misunderstanding? She didn't want to believe that Huo Jinyao was that kind of person. even though he was only 12 years old. People say that 3 years old depends on one's age and 7 years old depends on one's age. In her eyes, Hu Jingyao was definitely not a person who only cared about himself and others. You really do care about him. Lu Tongjia wiped the tears off her face. She sniffed and said, I also hope that it's a misunderstanding. I also hope that my only surviving son is still my good son. But I know it's not a misunderstanding. When Hu Jingyao was found, he was unconscious. Although the kidnappers wanted to keep him as a hostage, they wouldn't treat him too well. She used to be so worried that she couldn't eat or sleep well by Hu Jinyao's side. Even after seeing the kidnappers' confessions, she wanted to give Hu Jinyao a chance to explain. But what did she wait for? Hu Jinyao talked in his sleep. He said that he was the future young master of the Hua family. He said that those two were illegitimate children. Even if they got a share of the money in the future, they wouldn't get anything. It didn't matter at all. When she heard what her son said, it was like a bolt from the blue. She hated that Hu Jinyao was able to lie so well at such a young age in order to survive and protect himself. She had never known that her son had such a side to him. From that day on, in my heart, my son died too. He died in that kidnapping together with his brother and sister. Lu Tongjia's voice was calm, but she was trying hard to suppress her negative emotions. She didn't want to believe Lu Tongjia's words, but she was sure that she wasn't lying. Does Grandpa know? If Hu Jinyao really did that kind of thing, how could Grandpa tolerate it? Lu Tongjia sneered, thinking of old Master Hua's favoritism and her husband's helpless compromise. His grandpa always liked Hu Jinyao. He liked to spoil him. He even told me that Hu Jinyao was still young and immature. He would be fine if he was taught slowly. He was 12 years old and he was still immature? No matter how immature he was, he wouldn't push his brother and sister to their deaths. Lu Tongjia felt a sharp pain in her heart. She was in so much pain. For so many years, those who knew her thought that she had only lost 2 children. But only she knew that in her heart, when she found out what Hu Jinyao had done, she had already thought that the 3 children were gone. Especially Hu Jinyao. What she couldn't tolerate the most was his cold-bloodedness. Don't blame him for being immature. She thought that she doted on her daughter a little. After all, she was a girl. But for the other 2 children, she had always been fair. Hua Mingguang was busy with work, but she cared about all the children the same. How did Hu Jinyao repay her? He could push his brother and sister to their deaths for himself. Such a person, such a person. Lu Tongjia's fingernails dug into her palms. She really hated Hu Jinyao. Not only did she hate him for killing the other 2 children, but she also hated herself. Such a child was her son. For so many years, she thought that he would feel guilty and blame himself. But he didn't. Hu Jinyao lived and worked like a normal person. Not only was he alive, but he was also living a good life. After so many years, the pain seemed to have faded away by this family. She was the only one who kept thinking about the 2 children she had lost. Other than her, who would remember that there used to be 3 children in this family? Such a person so young had such a vicious mind. How could she bear it? She would rather let Tianyu fall into the hands of Hui Yifan or Hui Yang. She didn't want such a vicious person to be the one who had the last laugh. Su Qingsang didn't know what to say. She seemed to have come over angrily, but now seeing Lu Tongjia like this, she suddenly felt that she was in no position to blame her. If what she said was true, she really couldn't get along with Hu Jinyao like a normal mother and son without a grudge. But Jinyao, he was still young at that time. It's normal for him to be afraid of death. Mrs. Hua. No matter what, the dead are gone. It's better to cherish the people in front of you. Lu Tongjia suddenly looked at Su Qingsang, her eyes full of pain and sharpness. Yes, you all want me to let it go. But how can I let it go? If I let it go, who will remember them? After the accident, old Master Hua didn't let people talk about it anymore. Not a single person in the Hua family brought it up again. Hu Jinyao naturally became the legitimate grandson of the Hua family, the real young master of the Hua family. But only she knew that all of this was based on him sacrificing his brother and sister. How could she forgive him? Even if it was her son, she couldn't let it go and she couldn't be indifferent to it. Su Qingsang's lips moved, but the words she wanted to say were stuck in her throat. Her heart was extremely heavy. I won't forgive him. Lu Tongjia returned to her seat as she spoke. Her face was pale and she looked very painful. You always want me to forget. But do you know? If I forget, it means betrayal. I don't want to. I can't forget my eldest son and I can't forget my youngest daughter. If no one else remembers them, then let me remember them. I will remember them firmly and never forget them until I die. After saying that, she closed her eyes. When she opened them again, there was only indifference in them. Go. I won't go to see him. I don't want to see him. Su Qingsang looked at Lu Tongjia. Mrs. Hua, Su Qingsang, you don't have to say any more. Hua Jinyao and I are getting along like this. He never listens to me and he never treats me as his mother. Su Qingsang gave Lu Tongjia a deep look, and in the end she could only stay silent. Chapter 548. When she got home, Hua Jinyao hadn't woken up yet. Yang Wenchang looked at her with a guilty look in his eyes. Su Qingsang didn't understand what that look meant until she saw Hua Jinyao's hand. The drip was done, but Yang Wenchang wasn't very familiar with it. When he pulled out the needle, he accidentally bled a little. There were bloodstains on the back of Hua Jinyao's hand. Su Qingsang glanced at him but didn't blame him. She had to blame herself for leaving Hua Jinyao here in order to question Lu Tongjia. You can go back. I'll take care of him. Okay. Yang Wenchang nodded. He thought for a moment and decided to tell Su Qingsang. President Hua seemed to have woken up just now, but he fell asleep again. It's okay. He fell asleep because of the injection. He'll wake up a little later. Yang Wenchang finally breathed a sigh of relief. After all, Su Qingsang was a doctor. She would take good care of Hua Jinyao. Su Qingsang only ate casually in the evening. There was porridge in the pot that she had made. The porridge was already very tasty. However, Hua Jinyao didn't wake up. She didn't expect that a person who usually looked so healthy would be knocked down by a cold. After Aunt Yu cleaned up, Su Qingsang asked her to go back. She looked at Hua Jinyao and guarded him with a laptop. Thinking of what Lu Tongjia had said, she went online to look up the old case. However, she didn't know if someone had hidden the information, but Su Qingsang couldn't find anything. 10 years ago, the internet wasn't as developed as it was now. It was normal that she couldn't find anything. While she was thinking about whether she should find a time to ask Old Master Hua, Hua Jinyao woke up. Su Qingsang heard the noise and quickly got up. Hua Jinyao saw her as soon as he opened his eyes. Old, don't talk. He had slept for a whole day. Su Qingsang poured a glass of warm water and helped him up so that he drank most of it. After drinking the warm water, Hua Jinyao looked much better. Honey, you have a cold. Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao and said in a reproachful tone, It's not even summer yet and you're already showering with cold water. Do you want yourself to get sick? Hua Jinyao thought of the email he had read before. He looked at her and smiled but didn't say anything. Su Qingsang knew that he was in a bad mood, so she didn't continue asking. She put her hand on Hua Jinyao's forehead and said, It seems that the fever is gone. But you still have to take the medicine. Wait a moment, I made some porridge. Have some porridge before you get sick. Then take the medicine. All right. Hua Jinyao had no objection. He watched her go out and soon came back with porridge in his hand. I can't help it if you think it's too bland. Su Qingsang put the tray aside and picked up the bowl of porridge. Who told you to be sick? I can only eat this. You did it. Yes. Su Qingsang nodded, scooped a spoonful of porridge and glared at Hua Jinyao. Don't complain. How could that be? Hua Jinyao's voice was a little hoarse, but he didn't forget to sweet talk. The porridge cooked by my wife is the best in the world. Su Qingsang glared at him with a reproachful expression. She blew on the porridge to cool it down and placed it next to his lips. Hua Jinyao enjoyed the care of his wife, and his eyes were full of tenderness when he looked at her. Su Qingsang fed him slowly but methodically. She seemed to be very familiar with it. Hua Jinyao looked at her and smiled. You're very familiar with it. Yes. It's not like I haven't done it before. When Su Qingsang said this, she froze while feeding him the porridge. She was so familiar with it because of Xiang Kaiping. At that time, Xiang Kaiping fell and hurt her waist. Although there were nurses in the hospital, she was the one taking care of her. But who would have thought that Xiang Kaiping wasn't her biological mother? The last time they met was such an unpleasant scene. Xiang Kaiping didn't understand her, and she couldn't muster up the courage to ask if Xiang Kaiping was doing well. Hua Jinyao could naturally think of what she could think of. Do you miss Auntie? Xiang Kaiping was a good person. Hua Jinyao never denied that. If she really was Su Qingsang's biological mother, it would actually be good. If you want to see her, I can help you arrange it. Su Qingsang pursed her lips tightly and finally shook her head. Without saying anything, she put the last spoonful of porridge into Hua Jinyao's mouth. Another bowl? Okay. Su Qingsang got up to get the porridge. She actually wanted to see Xiang Kaiping. But so what if she saw her? Whether it was Xiang Kaiping or her, neither of them could go back to the past. It was impossible for them to be as close as mother and daughter as before. The last time they met was like a broken relationship, so Su Qingsang was also afraid to see Xiang Kaiping. During this period of time she would also think of Xiang Kaiping. Last time when she went to Lin City she wanted to go to see her, but later time was tight and she really didn't know what to do if she saw her, so she could only give up. She looked down. Maybe next time when there was a chance she could secretly take a look. She didn't want to disturb her, just take a look. Hua Jinyao ate another bowl of porridge and Su Qingsang gave him the medicine. He was still not in good spirits and his face was still a little pale. After Su Qingsang cleaned up, she returned to the room and thought about Lu Tongjia's words. She couldn't believe that the person Lu Tongjia was talking about was Hua Jinyao. Jinyao. She wanted to ask him about the kidnapping case back then. She wanted to ask him if he still remembered what happened back then. She wanted to ask him how his brother and sister had died. Was he really the one who killed them? But now, looking at Hua Jinyao's weak face, she couldn't ask a word. Yes. Su Qingsang didn't say anything. She took out the thermometer and said, "Take your temperature again and see if the fever is down." "It should be down, right?" "Don't be silly. Take it first." She gestured for him to put the thermometer in place, and Su Qingsang sat down next to him and looked at him. "Do you still have a headache?" "It doesn't hurt," Hua Jinyao added. "It doesn't hurt at all. It's just that my body is a little stiff. I've slept for a day. How can it not be stiff?" Su Qingsang looked at him and couldn't help but say, "You too. You're so old. Why did you run to take a cold shower? Do you think you're Superman?" Hua Jinyao's smile was a little faint, and he didn't say why he took a cold shower. Su Qingsang wanted to ask a few times, but she stopped because of his expression. "What's wrong?" Hua Jinyao seemed to have noticed something wrong with Su Qingsang. "Don't worry, I'm in good health. This was an accident." Su Qingsang used to think that she couldn't understand Hua Jinyao. He always had some emotions that were hidden in his heart. But now she suddenly felt that she could understand him a little more. He was clearly sick, leaning against the headboard. His heart hurt, didn't it? He was hurt by Lu Tongjia and misunderstood by his own mother. But he could hide everything with such a strong and deep look in his eyes, as if nothing had happened. Once again she felt a slight, gentle throbbing pain in her heart. The pain was so unbearable that she couldn't help it. She sat on the bed, leaned forward and kissed Hua Jinyao's lips. Her action surprised him, but he quickly pulled her body away. "I'm sick." He didn't want to infect her. "Don't worry. It's okay." Su Qingsang smiled slightly. "I'm in good health." She wanted to kiss him again, but Hua Jinyao held her shoulder and said, "You're a doctor. What's wrong? Don't you have any medical knowledge?" Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao. Because of his illness, his lips were darker than usual. The way he looked at her was clearly disapproving. She smiled and said, "Yes. I'm a doctor. But I'm still your wife." Su Qingsang put her hands on his shoulders and slowly moved closer to him. "Maybe you'll get better if you infect me with your cold?" Hua Jinyao looked at her half-joking, half-serious eyes and held her in his arms with the hand that didn't have the thermometer. He pressed her head against his chest and pressed his chin against the top of her hair. "You're my wife and I'm your husband. What should I do? I don't want you to catch a cold." He gently kissed the top of her hair and said, "If you really want me to kiss you, well, you can wait until I get better." He was being naughty again. Su Qingsang gently patted him on the arm. "Be careful, don't drop the thermometer." Hua Jinyao's words brought Su Qingsang back to her senses. She stepped back, looked at the time and took out the thermometer for him. "It's 38 degrees. It's still a little hot. You should rest early. Have a good sleep. The fever should be completely gone by tomorrow." "Well, thank you, Dr. Su. You've worked hard, Dr. Su." Hua Jinyao spoke in a hoarse voice. Su Qingsang pulled the pillow he was leaning against away. "Sleep when you're sick, wife." "How am I not being honest?" Hua Jinyao said that, but he still lay down obediently. He yawned. Because of the medicine, he wanted to sleep even more than usual. "Aren't you going to sleep?" "I'm going to take a shower." Su Qingsang covered him with the quilt. "You go to sleep first. I'll be right there." When Su Qingsang came out of the shower, Hua Jinyao was already asleep. She looked at his sleeping face and in the end she couldn't bring herself to ask him about the kidnapping case. She didn't sleep deeply that night. She woke up from time to time to look at Hua Jinyao. She was relieved to find that he was sleeping soundly and didn't seem to have a nightmare. After all, Hua Jinyao was young and healthy. When Su Qingsang woke up the next morning, he had recovered most of his strength. She stood up with her coat and was about to go out. You're going to work? Su Qingsang quickly sat up and said with a disapproving face, You're still very weak. You still need to rest more. It's okay. Hua Jinyao shook his head. I have a lot of things to do in the company. I can't rest for too long. Su Qingsang looked at his face and wanted to say something, but she hesitated. In the end she said helplessly, Then don't drive. I'll drive you. Call me when you get off work and I'll pick you up. Hua Jinyao didn't object this time. It's my honor to be my driver, Dr. Su. Seeing that he was talking nonsense again, Su Qingsang really believed that he was fine. She looked at Hua Jinyao's eyes carefully. There was no pain or discomfort like that night. Su Qingsang's heart ached. He had hidden his emotions again. Realizing this, her heart ached dully. The following words were free. 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 Important things should be said 3 times. Because the author said that he couldn't fit 500 words. I found that some people don't understand Hua's mother's behavior and say that she's crazy. Let me tell you the truth. There was a family where the brother died to save the sister. After that, the mother never liked her daughter. They were both biological children. It's not that she valued boys over girls. She just felt that the daughter killed her son. When I was writing this story, I was inspired by this news. In fact, if a person walked into the wrong path, it was very difficult to get out. Just like Hua's mother, she lost 2 children at once. These 2 children also died because of Hua Jinyao, at least in her heart she thought so, so they took things too hard and went to extremes. There was a reason for this. Go and see Zhang Xiaohan's mother and Mei Yanfang's mother. What did Zhang Xiaohan and Mei Yanfang do wrong? But how did their mother treat them? One framed her daughter for taking drugs, and the other auctioned off her daughter's underwear after she died. I really can't understand these 2 mothers-in-law. Why do they have such parents? But in fact, there are such people in this world. In this world, it doesn't mean that people who are related by blood will forgive all the mistakes made by each other. My husband has a classmate. His father cheated and hurt his mother. Until now, this classmate has refused to forgive his father. He hasn't called him father for 2 or 3 years. He doesn't speak when he sees his father. He turns his face away when he sees his father. He doesn't want to stay at home. This is just an affair. The other party is his own father. He can't forgive him for not letting it go. How to say it? Some people can accept the hurt from their loved ones, but some can't. Those who can accept it will just laugh it off. Those who can't accept it may have to grieve for the rest of their lives. Chapter 549. After breakfast, she walked Hua Jinyao to his company. Su Qingsang put a box of medicine in his hand. Take the medicine as soon as you feel uncomfortable. Call me if you can't take it. I'll be right there. Hua Jinyao suddenly approached her. Before she could finish her words, Hua Jinyao kissed her on the cheek. Su Qingsang blinked and looked at him. He kissed her and immediately moved away. He had a mischievous smile on his face. Dr. Su, don't worry. I'll take good care of myself. Actually, his complexion was not very good. His face was slightly pale, but she knew that she couldn't convince him. Su Qingsang stopped talking. Maybe she should call Yang Wenchang later and ask him to keep an eye on him. Hua Jinyao picked up the box of medicine, waved at her and got out of the car. He seemed to be in a good mood. However, Su Qingsang's heart was heavy. She couldn't relax at all. Of course, she believed that he would take good care of himself. But what was he going to do? After all, the person who hurt him was his mother. His biological mother. Besides, Lu Tongjia could hurt the people around him. It must be a serious problem. She didn't know how Hua Jinyao was going to solve it. President Hua? Why are you at work? Yang Wenchang saw Hua Jinyao at work and looked surprised. You've recovered? Yes. You've recovered? I'm almost recovered. Hua Jinyao nodded and looked at Ding Qing's office. Is Ding Qing here? Not yet. Yang Wenchang followed him into the office and said, President Hua, what do you think about Ding Qing? Should we fire her? Hua Jinyao walked to the desk and sat down. He put the box of medicine on the desk and said, What do you think? Yang Wenchang frowned and thought carefully. President Hua, you don't want to fire her? Not now. Hua Jinyao thought of Lu Tongjia and said, She hasn't done anything serious. Why should we fire her? Should we just keep her? No. I'll ask my mother to send me another one. I don't know who sent her. His voice sounded sarcastic. Yang Wenchang didn't know what to say, so he stayed silent. Hua Jinyao didn't need his answer. It was better to keep Ding Qing here than to find someone else. However, there are some things that we can arrange. When Hua Jinyao said this, his eyes were sharp and full of danger. Yang Wenchang suddenly had a feeling that someone was going to be in trouble. Halfway through their business discussion, Yang Wenchang's phone rang. He looked at the number and was stunned for a moment. He glanced at Hu Jingyao and quickly picked up the call. Mrs. Hua. His shout attracted Hu Jinyao's attention immediately. Yang Wenchang felt a lot of pressure for a moment. Assistant Yang, I'm Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang cut to the chase and said, Jinyao hasn't fully recovered yet. He insisted that he had to go to work. I can't stop him from going to work, but you have to be careful today. If he has any problems, you have to call me immediately. I got it. Mrs. Hua. Also keep an eye on him. Lunch should be light. Don't let him work overtime at night. If there are any social engagements, just reject them. Yes, I got it. There's nothing else. Thank you for your hard work. Not at all, not at all. Yang Wenchang hung up the phone and looked at Hu Jinyao. It was Mrs. Hua. She asked me to keep an eye on you so that you don't get too tired. Hu Jinyao finally had a smile on his face. Thinking of how Su Qingsang had been worried when she came out and repeatedly told him to take care of his body, he felt a little warm in his heart. Don't worry, it's just a few grasshoppers. These people won't be happy for too long. Since he had seen through the other party's plot, how could he let the other party continue to be complacent? Dr. Su, is my illness serious? The patient's voice brought Su Qingsang's attention back from the checklist in her hand. She looked up at the person in front of her. It's not very serious. It's just a small cyst. Take some anti-inflammatory medicine, pay attention to your diet and rest. This doesn't need to be cut off. Would it be useless to just take medicine? Can you do surgery? Ms. Zhang, look. Your cyst is less than 2 centimeters. It's actually just inflammation. You just need to take some medicine and pay attention to rest. It will naturally go away. Under normal circumstances, we don't recommend surgery, because it's not necessary at all. All right then. I'll listen to you. I'll prescribe some medicine for you. You can take the list and get the medicine. After saying that, Su Qingsang added, these medicines can be reimbursed if you have medical insurance. So don't worry. All right. Thank you then. After sending the patient away, there was no debate today. Su Qingsang got up, rubbed her shoulders and walked to her office. She was a little distracted just now. In fact, on the one hand, she was worried about Hu Jinyao's health and whether he could take it today. On the other hand, she was still thinking about the kidnapping case. Lu Tongjia had lost 2 children at once. It was not impossible for her to vent her anger on Hu Jinyao. Then there might be some misunderstanding. Should she help Hu Jinyao to resolve the misunderstanding between Lu Tongjia and him? There was no child who didn't want a mother's love. She believed that Hu Jinyao was no exception. So what happened back then? If she couldn't get all the answers from Lu Tongjia, could she ask old Master Hua? Or directly ask Hu Jinyao? With this idea, she couldn't help but take out her phone and call Hu Jinyao. When she went out in the morning, her voice was still a little hoarse. She asked Yang Wenchang to buy some throat lozenges for him. Honey, it's me. Su Qingsang heard that his voice seemed to be a little better. How are you? Are you feeling better? Yes, much better. That's good. Su Qingsang paused for a moment. She didn't know how to ask the question in her heart. What's wrong? Hu Jinyao noticed the pause in her voice. What's wrong? I just wanted to ask you. The second half of the sentence went in circles, but what came out of his mouth was, have you eaten? Not yet. Wenchang ordered takeout for me. It'll be delivered later. Takeout? Su Qingsang subconsciously frowned. Isn't there a cafeteria downstairs? He said that the soup in that hotel is good. It's good for the stomach. That's good. After another silence, Su Qingsang bit her lip and walked to the end of the corridor with her phone. Honey? Hu Jinyao called her again. Anything else? Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang felt that her palms were sweaty. But maybe because she didn't face Hu Jinyao directly, she was a little braver. I heard something. Chapter 550. Auntie, your mother, she. Su Qingsang didn't finish her sentence. She was too embarrassed to say it. She had never thought that there would be a mother who would say this to her child. Can I ask why she dislikes you so much? There was a sudden silence. Su Qingsang heard the heavy breathing on the other end of the phone. She suddenly realized that she might have done something wrong. She shouldn't have asked. She was about to explain when she heard Hu Jinyao's voice. Su Qingsang couldn't see his expression over the phone, but she could clearly hear the gloominess in his voice. If she doesn't like you, then she doesn't like you. What other reason is there? Su Qingsang's heart ached a little. Hu Jingyao was definitely not the kind of person who would speak up for his brother and sister in exchange for a chance to live. Hu Jingyao actually, I heard, honey. When Chang brought lunch up. I'm hungry. I'm going to eat first. Okay. Su Qingsang couldn't finish her sentence. The rest of her words were stuck in her throat like a stone. She knew that after today she would never have the courage to ask again. Hu Jingyao. Yes. It's okay. I'm going to eat too. Okay. Hu Jingyao hung up without saying anything else. Su Qingsang listened to the beeping sound on the phone and felt a little sad again. She closed her eyes, trying to suppress the emotion. Forget it. Since he didn't want to talk about it, she wouldn't ask. Some things should be left in the past. If Lu Tongjia didn't like Hu Jingyao, then so be it. Anyway, he still had her. It was enough that she liked him. Su Qingsang only had a minor surgery in the afternoon, so she got off work early. She didn't go to pick up Hu Jingyao directly. Instead, she went to the nearby market to buy some vegetables. She planned to cook by herself today. After buying the vegetables, she went to Hu Jingyao's company to pick him up. She wanted to go earlier to see if he had recovered from his cold. Also, she was afraid that he would be unhappy with her question at noon. He might think that she was trying to pry something out and that she wanted to take the initiative. She didn't have such a thought. She just hoped that she could help him if she could. She parked the car and went upstairs. She had been here once before. At that time, Yang Wenchang had taken her to the CEO's exclusive elevator, and she had gone upstairs with familiarity. Just as she was about to walk into Hu Jingyao's office, the door next to her opened. Ding Qing walked out. The two of them bumped into each other. When Su Qingsang saw him, she subconsciously furrowed her brows a little, but it only lasted for a few seconds. Soon, her face was as calm as when she first came in. She ignored Ding Qing and walked straight to Hu Jingyao's office. Ding Qing stood in front of Su Qingsang. She didn't know if she did it on purpose or not. Su Qingsang's expression didn't change, and she took a step to the side. When she moved to the left, Ding Qing moved to the right. When she moved to the right, Ding Qing moved to the left. The two of them stood face to face. Every step Ding Qing took was right in Su Qingsang's way. After a few times, Su Qingsang stopped and looked up at Ding Qing. What's up, Secretary Ding? Mrs. Hua, you're the one who's always blocking my way. Why are you asking me if I'm fine? Ding Qing raised her eyebrows slightly. There was obvious provocation in her eyes. Su Qingsang narrowed her eyes. If one looked carefully, one would find that her expression was exactly the same as Hu Jingyao's. Ding Qing stood there, waiting for Su Qingsang to lose her temper. However, Su Qingsang glanced at her and took a step back. Since Secretary Ding thinks that I'm blocking your way, please go ahead. Not only did she step aside, but she also gestured for Ding Qing to go first. Ding Qing was a little surprised. She stood there and didn't move. Su Qingsang turned her face sideways to look at her. What? Didn't you say that I'm blocking your way? Please go ahead. Ding Qing didn't leave. Instead, she took a step forward and stood in front of Su Qingsang. Mrs. Hua, you're very patient. With a smile on her lips, she leaned forward slightly and got close to Su Qingsang's face. In a very low voice, she said, I just don't know if Mrs. Hua will still be able to bear it when President Hua becomes mine one day. Su Qingsang stood still, watching Ding Qing yelling in front of her. Suddenly she giggled. Secretary Ding, you're so young but you have such a bad memory. I think you need to see a doctor. What do you mean? Secretary Ding, I told you last time that Hu Jingyao, he's not erect. Why can't you remember that? Or do you want him even though he's like this? Of course. Ding Qing raised her chin and said arrogantly, Mrs. Hua, I'm not that kind of shallow woman. The one I love is President Hua's woman. Is that so? Then I really have to look at you in a different light. Seeing the proud look on Ding Qing's face, Su Qingsang suddenly changed the topic. But you have to be able to afford it. She mimicked Ding Qing. She leaned forward, got close to Ding Qing's ear and whispered. After all, Hu Jingyao has high standards. He has high standards. I really don't take a liking to just anyone. With a smile on her face, she took a step back after saying that. Seeing Ding Qing's face turn green, the smile on Ding Qing's face grew brighter and brighter. Without looking at Ding Qing walked past her and was about to leave. Mrs. Hua, you've gone too far. Ding Qing blocked Su Qingsang's way and said coldly, Mrs. Hua, you're too confident. After all, no one knows how things will turn out until the end. Isn't that right? Indeed. Su Qingsang nodded. No one knows how things will turn out until the end. But I don't need to wait until the end. I can tell you that Hu Jingyao is mine. No one can take him away from me. Mrs. Hua, you're so confident. I hope you can always be so confident. Of course. Su Qingsang's expression didn't change. She looked at Ding Qing calmly as if she didn't care about Ding Qing at all. After all, people who are liked and loved by others will naturally have confidence. Unlike some people who have no one to love or want them, so they have to steal other people's men. Speaking of which, it's really sad, don't you think so? She didn't think that she would lose to Ding Qing when it came to talking. Ding Qing's face grew darker and darker. Her chest heaved. If she didn't care about the consequences, she would have hit Su Qingsang. Mrs. Hua, you really don't need to be so proud. Even if I'm not with President Hua, there will be other women around him. It's just a matter of time. Do you think that you can stop all the women who approach President Hua? Chapter 551. While saying that, she glanced at Ding Qing from head to toe without hesitation. Her eyes scanned Ding Qing's body from head to toe like X-rays. You don't need to be careful of someone like Secretary Ding. In other words, Ding Qing wasn't qualified. Did I say something wrong? I'm sorry. After all, doctors like to tell the truth. Ding Qing's hands were hanging by her sides. She clenched her fists. She was about to lose her temper. Suddenly the office door opened. Hu Jinyao and Yang Wenchang walked out of the office. Seeing the two of them standing together, Hu Jinyao paused for a second, then glanced at Yang Wenchang. Both Yang Wenchang and Hu Jinyao had the feeling that Ding Qing was bullying Su Qingsang. Hu Jinyao took a step forward and his face darkened. Su Qingsang walked up to him and put her arm around his. Are you off work? Are you feeling better? Hu Jinyao didn't answer her question. He glanced at Ding Qing, who was not far away from him, and ignored her. He lowered his head to look at Su Qingsang. His eyes were gentle. Why didn't you call me? I could have asked Wenchang to pick you up. Assistant Yang took me there last time. It's not like I don't know him. Su Qingsang smiled brightly, but didn't mention what had just happened. What are you talking about? Hu Jinyao asked casually. He glanced at Ding Qing's face out of the corner of his eye. Thinking of what Su Qingsang had said to him last time, his eyes turned dangerous. Nothing. Secretary Ding was worried about you. Su Qingsang glanced at Ding Qing as she spoke. Secretary Ding told me that she was talking about you. You're always working like a madman. She told me to care about you more. Really? Hu Jinyao glanced at Ding Qing. Thank you, Secretary Ding. You're so considerate. Of course. Su Qingsang nodded. She raised her face shyly. Speaking of which, I feel like I don't care enough about you. Jinyao, you won't blame me, will you? Of course. Hu Jinyao rubbed Su Qingsang's head. I marry a wife to love her. I'll be happy if you take care of yourself. Jinyao, you're so nice. Su Qingsang tiptoed and planted a kiss on Hu Jinyao's cheek. All right. Since you're done, let's go home first. All right. Hu Jinyao looked back at Yang Wenchang. Assistant Yang, I'll leave the rest to you. Yes. Yang Wenchang nodded. Their eyes met in the air. They both understood the meaning of each other's eyes. Su Qingsang didn't notice the look in Hu Jinyao's eyes. She put her arm around Hu Jinyao's and walked past Ding Qing. Thank you for your concern, Secretary Ding. We'll knock off first. Take care, President Hua, Ding Qing said. She didn't look as aggressive as she had been when she was talking to Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang couldn't help but admire him. Just now, Ding Qing had said that she could tolerate it, but she actually thought that Ding Qing was more tolerant. He just didn't know how much this person could endure and how long he could endure. Jinyao. I'm not happy. What happened? Seeing that Su Qingsang's face suddenly darkened, Hu Jinyao stopped walking and asked, Why are you upset? Su Qingsang also stopped walking and pointed her finger at Ding Qing. I'm not happy that she cares about you so much. Su Qingsang showed a side of her that she had never shown before in front of Hu Jinyao. She pouted slightly and her eyes were obviously unhappy. You're mine. I don't like it when other women care about you so much. Ding Qing widened her eyes and looked at Su Qingsang. She couldn't believe her eyes. Just now this woman wasn't like this in front of her. But now she was pretending. Su Qingsang pretended that she didn't see the shock in Ding Qing's eyes. She held Hu Jinyao's arm. Jinyao? Hu Jinyao stopped walking, narrowed his eyes and looked at Ding Qing. Did you hear that, Secretary Ding? Ding Qing held back the urge to vomit blood, but she swallowed her anger. I know. President Hua, I'll be more careful next time. Ding Qing lowered her head. She looked humble and low-key. She was totally different from the arrogant woman she had been a moment ago. Hua Jinyao glanced at her, then lowered his head to meet Su Qingsang's eyes. The gloominess in his eyes faded away, and he became gentle almost instantly. Not angry anymore? No. Su Qingsang shook her head. She looked willful, which was rare for her. I'm still angry. I'm still not happy. Seeing Hua Jinyao frown, she shook his arm and said, think about it. She cares about you so much. It's obviously more than a colleague. You two work in the same company and you're even on the same floor. She's your secretary. Neither Yang Wenchang nor Hua Jinyao had seen this side of Su Qingsang. Yang Wenchang was so shocked that his eyeballs almost popped out. He couldn't believe that Su Qingsang was the same person who was calm and capable yesterday. However, Hua Jinyao noticed that deep in Su Qingsang's eyes, there was a mischievous look in them. Su Qingsang shook Hua Jinyao's arm like a child who couldn't get candy. I don't care. I don't want to see her stay by your side. I don't want to see her ever again. You should stay on this floor and work together. I don't want to see her care about you in the name of work. What do you want then? Hua Jinyao wanted to ask Ding Qing to leave, but he needed an opportunity. Fire her. Su Qingsang raised her head and pointed at Ding Qing confidently. I want you to fire her. Ding Qing finally couldn't stand it anymore. She took a step forward and said, Mrs. Hua. Please don't, that was too much. Ding Qing held back her words. She looked at Su Qingsang and said, Mrs. Hua, I'm an employee of Tianyu Group. You're not from Tianyu Group. I don't think you have the right to do that. No matter how calm she was, she couldn't stand Su Qingsang who didn't play by the rules. She couldn't stand Su Qingsang who didn't play by the rules. She knew that she was being humiliated by what she said, but she couldn't help but want to argue back. Su Qingsang blinked and looked at Hua Jinyao. She looked innocent and cute. Jinyao, she said that I don't have the right to do that. Don't I have the right to fire someone from your company? Of course you do. Hua Jinyao resisted the urge to laugh. He also resisted the urge to hug Su Qingsang and kiss her hard. He looked at Ding Qing coldly and said, Miss Ding, did you hear what my wife said? Go pack your things and leave now. Su Qingsang widened her eyes. In fact, she just wanted to make things difficult for Ding Qing. She didn't expect that Hua Jinyao would really ask her to leave. President Hua. Of course, she didn't think that Hua Jinyao had found out what she had done. She didn't think that Hua Jinyao had wanted to fire her anyway. She took a step forward and stood in front of Hua Jinyao. The look on her face was anger. She was unwilling and dissatisfied with Su Qingsang. Chapter 552. Reckless. Hua Jinyao raised his eyebrows and looked at Su Qingsang. I don't think so. President Hua. Ding Qing clenched her teeth so hard that they almost broke. President Hua, can you please be serious? This is Tianyu Group, Tianyu Company, not your home. Don't you have any problem with Mrs. Hua's behavior? No problem. Good. Then what did I do wrong? Ding Qing stared at Su Qingsang, then looked at Hua Jinyao in disbelief. She was the one who helped him get rid of Qiao Hong. Shouldn't Hua Jinyao thank her? But he fired her so easily. What did you do wrong? Hua Jinyao put an arm around Su Qingsang's shoulder. You just made my wife unhappy. Su Qingsang was held in his arms. She raised her head to look at him, and her eyes were almost sparkling. That's it? Ding Qing was so angry that her voice began to tremble. She couldn't control it. That's it? That's enough. Hua Jinyao turned around and kissed Su Qingsang's cheek. I'm henpecked. Su Qingsang almost burst out laughing. Yang Wenchang, who was standing not far behind them, was having a hard time holding back his laughter. Hua Jinyao was calm. He held Su Qingsang's hand tightly and said, Let's go. President Hua. Ding Qing couldn't help but step forward to stop them from leaving. Yang Wenchang stepped forward and blocked Ding Qing's way. Secretary Ding, you should have heard what President Hua said. Assistant Yang, President Hua is crazy. Why didn't you stop Mrs. Hua? Ding Qing was furious, but she still managed to find a trace of rationality. Everyone in Tianyu Group knew that if there was one person who could change Hua Jinyao's mind, that person would be Yang Wenchang. Secretary Ding. President Hua has already made things clear. Don't make a fuss. Like Hua Jinyao, Yang Wenchang didn't take it as Su Qingsang's willfulness. He listened to the audio file and knew who Ding Qing was. Her dismissal was not an injustice at all. As for why I didn't stop her, I'm sorry. The whole family. But Mrs. Hua was the boss. Who asked you to upset Mrs. Hua? Su Qingsang didn't care how unhappy Ding Qing was. She followed Hu Jinyao into the elevator. She still had a surreal feeling. Her hand was held by Hu Jinyao, and she turned to look at him from time to time. Her gaze was very complicated. It was no longer just being touched. It was shock and disbelief. Hu Jinyao caught her gaze and squeezed her palm. "Why do you keep looking at me? Have you realized that your husband is the most handsome man in the universe?" Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang was just a little angry because Ding Qing always talked nonsense in front of her. She didn't really want her to be fired. I was just joking with you. I don't really want you to fire Secretary Ding. She was not a willful woman, nor was she a woman who would make trouble for no reason. She came here today only because she didn't like Ding Qing's arrogant and aggressive attitude. Besides, Ding Qing knew that Hu Jinyao had a wife, but she still tried to get close to him. However, she had heard from Hu Jinyao that Ding Qing was quite capable. Since she was capable, it would be a pity to let her go. Hu Jinyao talked to Assistant Yang. "Don't let Ding Qing leave like this." "What? Are you not happy to see her? Just let her go." He had indeed planned to keep Ding Qing under his nose to keep an eye on her. However, Hu Jinyao changed his mind. So what if Lu Tongjia asked someone to come? Zhang Yang was on paternity leave, not maternity leave. If it didn't work, Hu Jinyao could ask Zhang Yang to come back. No, that's too childish. Su Qingsang didn't think it was appropriate. "I was really joking with you. She does make me feel a little uncomfortable, but it's not enough to fire her. The most important point was, you fired her so casually and for such a reason. Maybe the board of directors of your company will scold you later." She didn't say who the board members were. The company belonged to the Huo family. For so many years, Hua Mingguang watched Lu Tongjia make things difficult for Hu Jinyao without saying a word. She didn't want to make things more difficult for him in the company. She didn't know much about business before, but ever since she met Li Qianxue, she gradually learned some things. For example, Li Qianxue kicked Su Qinghui out of the company. However, not many people knew the truth. They all said that Li Qianxue was too cruel and that she killed the donkey when it was no longer needed. She gave up the bow when she was done. Li Qianxue wouldn't tell her these things. However, there was still Su Yusen in the company. He would occasionally say a few words. She asked Shi Mengwan, who stayed in Lin City, and she could guess most of it. Li Qianxue completely belonged to the Li family. Li Qianxue fired Su Qinghui and people said that Tianyu Group didn't belong to Hu Jinyao alone. What if Hua Mingguang took this opportunity to make trouble for Hu Jinyao? "Don't worry. It'll be fine." Hu Jinyao squeezed her hand. "She's my secretary. Since she made you unhappy, she'll still be my secretary in the future. She'll work by my side and you'll have to see her eventually. It's inevitable that you'll be unhappy. It's better to let her go." But Hu Jinyao kissed her on the lips and she couldn't say the rest of the words. "Don't worry, baby. It'll be fine." His calling her baby made Su Qingsang's heart soften. She wanted to say something, but she didn't know how to change Hu Jinyao's mind. "All right." Hu Jinyao looked at her serious face and gently pinched her cheek. "Smile. Don't frown. You look like a little old woman." "Go to hell." Su Qingsang waved his hand away. "You look like a little old man." "Yes. I'm a little old man and you're a little old woman. We're just a couple." Hu Jinyao didn't object. Su Qingsang also smiled and took the initiative to hold his hand. "Okay. We'll be a pair of old men and old women. If she could hold this person's hand until the end of her life, then this life would really be perfect, wouldn't it?" Hu Jinyao's reaction was to hold her hand tightly and not let go. Old Master Hua looked at Hu Jinyao with concern in his eyes. "Why do you look a little thinner? Have you been busy at the company recently?" "It's been all right." Hu Jinyao had been sick for 2 days. Although he recovered quickly, he had been busy during this period. He didn't actually look thinner, but his complexion had always been a little worse. "Take care of yourself. Don't be too tired." Old Master Hua was still very concerned about this grandson of his. There was a lot of concern in his words. Hu Jinyao was touched and his expression was a little moved. "Thank you, Grandpa. I know." Qingsang. Old Master Hua looked at Su Qingsang, who was sitting next to him. "Jinyao always doesn't care about his own affairs. Since you're already married, you should be more responsible and take care of him." "Grandpa, don't worry. I will." Su Qingsang didn't need Old Master Hua to tell her to take good care of Hu Jinyao. However, Hu Jinyao was obviously busier than before these days. She knew that it wasn't good for his recovery, but she couldn't stop him. She thought that Hu Jinyao was busy because Ding Qing left. She felt a little guilty because he was short of someone to take care of. Was she causing trouble for him? Thinking of this, Su Qingsang couldn't help but feel a little guilty. It wasn't that old Master He didn't know that, but he just said it casually. Grandpa, what are you talking about? I don't need Qingsang to take care of me. I should take care of her. Take care of each other. Take care of each other. Old Master He liked to see the two of them getting along well. Nothing could make him happier than seeing his grandson and granddaughter-in-law get along well. At this time Lu Tongjia came downstairs. After venting her emotions on Su Qingsang the other day, she felt a little uncomfortable these days. She didn't look very good. As soon as she came downstairs she saw old Master Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang looking at each other happily. She slightly frowned, walked to the sofa and sat down. Hua Jinyao saw her and greeted her. Su Qingsang followed suit and called her auntie. Ever since she found out about the knot in Lu Tongjia's heart, the way she looked at her was a little complicated. Rationally, she knew that Lu Tongjia was also a pitiful person, but emotionally she couldn't accept Lu Tongjia venting her anger on her. Lu Tongjia acted as if she didn't see Su Qingsang's gaze. She would never forgive Hua Jinyao. Even if Su Qingsang found out, it would be the same. It's rare today. It's not the weekend. You still remember to come back to see your grandpa? Hua Jinyao didn't respond. Su Qingsang slightly frowned because of the hostility in her words. She looked at Hua Jinyao with some worry. No matter how much Lu Tongjia didn't like him before, she probably didn't do anything to the company, but now, I can come to see Grandpa even if it's not the weekend. Hua Jinyao wasn't affected by Lu Tongjia's cold face at all. I can come if I want to. Yeah, you're old enough to have your own ideas. You don't need other people's permission to do anything. You can do it on your own. What she said was really a little strange. Old Master Hua glanced at Lu Tongjia. Tongjia, I'm happy that the child came to see me. What are you talking about? What am I talking about? I'm talking like a normal person. Lu Tongjia looked at Hua Jinyao with obvious dissatisfaction in her eyes. Dad, you don't know what Hua Jinyao has done. What's wrong with me saying a few words to him? Tongjia? Old Master Hua knew that Lu Tongjia didn't like Hua Jinyao and that she had a knot in her heart. For so many years he didn't say anything, but recently Lu Tongjia seemed to have gone more and more overboard. Now he had the intention to side with Hua Jinyao. He was a little unhappy about Lu Tongjia's provocation. Dad, do you know? With one word, Hua Jinyao fired an employee who was doing a good job in the company. Lu Tongjia glanced at Hua Jinyao and then looked at old Master Hua. She didn't hide the sarcasm and dissatisfaction in her eyes. Chapter 553. Lu Tongjia didn't expect that Ding Qing hadn't even been his wife for 3 months. Hua Jinyao fired her just like that, and the reason was so ridiculous. When she heard that, she was so angry that she almost died of anger. If she hadn't been sick and had rested at home for a few days, she might have gone to him and questioned him. Old Master Hua didn't understand. He glanced at Hua Jinyao. He didn't believe that Hua Jinyao was a man without a sense of propriety. He fired her just because of what Su Qingsang said. Speaking of this, Lu Tongjia was even more dissatisfied with Su Qingsang. She knew that she was an illegitimate daughter, and that she was inexperienced and incompetent. Previously he had noticed that she had some manners. She wasn't someone who didn't know manners. But now, because of her inexplicable jealousy, Hua Jinyao fired her employee like a fatuous emperor? Only Su Qingsang could do something like that. Thinking of this, Lu Tongjia couldn't help but ask. She turned around and looked at Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang, I really want to ask you, what about your upbringing? Is your upbringing telling you to meddle in your husband's business? Is it because of your family upbringing that you kick people out just because you don't like them? Su Qingsang, if that's the case, then I've learned a lot. Su Qingsang pressed her lips into a straight line. She had thought that she had been a little irrational that day, but now she was speechless. Old Master Hua didn't believe that Su Qingsang was that kind of person. He glanced at Hua Jinyao and said, Isn't your secretary Zhang Yang? How did he offend Qingsang? Old Master Hua had been to the company many times, and Zhang Yang had run errands for Hua Jinyao. Hearing Lu Tongjia's words, he couldn't help but look at Su Qingsang. He had a good impression of Zhang Yang. He was down-to-earth and hard-working. Most importantly, Yang Wenchang was steady and meticulous. Zhang Yang was lively and quick-witted. Both Zhang Yang and Zhang Yang were good helpers for Hua Jinyao. Which one is Zhang Yang? Ding Qing. Lu Tongjia glanced at Su Qingsang as she spoke. Hua Jinyao has a new female secretary. She, on the other hand, argued with Hu Jinyao to fire her just because she found Hu Jinyao pleasing to the eye. Hu Jinyao hadn't said a word before. Now he raised his head and glanced at Lu Tongjia. Finally he said, "Mom, you really know a lot about me. Ding Qing has only been here for a few days." Mom remembers her name quite clearly. Lu Tongjia's expression changed slightly, but she soon calmed down because of her age. She looked at Hu Jinyao with a cold face. "What's wrong? Am I wrong to care about you?" "Thank you for your concern, Mom," Hu Jinyao said ambiguously. When his eyes met Lu Tongjia's face, his gaze was deep and meaningful. His gaze was suggestive, making Lu Tongjia feel uncomfortable. "Hu Jinyao, what kind of attitude is that? What do you mean?" "I'm your mother. What kind of tone are you using to talk to me?" Hu Jinyao didn't lower his head, nor did he look away. He just stared at Lu Tongjia. At first, Lu Tongjia stared back at Hu Jinyao confidently, but in the end she was defeated by him. She turned her face away, feeling that it was really hard for her to swallow her anger. She couldn't help but stare at Hu Jinyao. "What's wrong? Can I say it? You dare to do it? Why are you afraid that I will say it?" Su Qingsang looked at Hu Jinyao worriedly. She subconsciously reached out to hold Hu Jinyao's hand. Hu Jinyao's expression didn't change at all. He just looked at Lu Tongjia calmly. Lu Tongjia became angrier. She turned to old Master Hua and said, "Dad, tell me. I've been in the Hua family for so many years. When have I ever interfered with Mingguang's business? When have I not stood behind Mingguang, not interfering, not caring?" Su Qingsang, on the other hand, interfered with Hu Jinyao's business as soon as she came here? "Let me ask you, Dad. Is this reasonable? Is it?" Old Master Hua didn't speak. He subconsciously looked at Su Qingsang and said, "Qingsang, stand there. Is this true?" "Grandpa." Su Qingsang bit her lip. This was indeed her fault. "I can explain this, She said, "I can explain this." Explain? Are you trying to deny it?" Lu Tongjia was aggressive. Su Qingsang felt weak. At that time she was just angry at Ding Qing's provocation. She really didn't expect that it would have such an impact on Hu Jinyao. She couldn't help but look at old Master Hua and said, "Grandpa, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I was..." "Grandpa." Hu Jinyao grabbed her hand and interrupted Su Qingsang. He glanced at Lu Tongjia, then met old Master Hua's disapproving look. "I did fire Ding Qing. But I didn't fire her because of Qingsang. I fired her because of Ding Qing. She seduced me." Hearing that, Su Qingsang widened her eyes and looked at Hu Jinyao. Even Lu Tongjia's expression changed. "Hu Jinyao, what are you talking about? How could Ding Qing? Why not? Mom, do you know Ding Qing that well?" Lu Tongjia stopped talking and averted her eyes unnaturally. "She's your secretary. How could I know her?" Old Master Hua looked at Lu Tongjia suspiciously. Lu Tongjia forced herself to calm down and said, "Jinyao, don't talk nonsense just because you want to cover up for Su Qingsang. You know very well how Ding Qing left." "I know very well indeed. I think you know better than me, don't you?" Hu Jinyao added meaningfully. Lu Tongjia looked into his eyes. For a moment she almost thought that he knew her plan, but then she thought that it was impossible. "Of course I know. What you did has spread in the company. Do you think I don't know?" "Yeah. The news spread everywhere. It's only been 2 days, but you've already heard about it. This is the first time I know that people in our company are so gossipy." Lu Tongjia moved her lips and was about to say something. Hu Jinyao added, "Mom, you really care about Ding Qing, don't you?" He leaned forward slightly and said in a deep voice, "I just don't know if you care about the other employees in our company as well. For example, Xiao Hong." Lu Tongjia's expression changed as soon as she heard Xiao Hong's name. She widened her eyes and looked at Hu Jinyao. Her hands were slightly trembling by her sides. However, it was only for a moment. Very quickly she completely calmed down. "Hu Jinyao, why are you talking in such a weird way? I care about Ding Qing only because you've crossed the line. Do you think that I'm interested in just anyone? Really? You've crossed the line to fire one employee. As a subordinate, Ding Qing didn't want to work hard. Isn't that too much?" He raised his eyebrows and looked straight into Lu Tongjia's face with his dark eyes. There was a deep meaning in his eyes that only they could understand. Lu Tongjia didn't say anything. She was close to Hua Mingguang, so she had never thought about building her own power in Tianyu Group. If Hu Jinyao hadn't annoyed her this time, she wouldn't have come up with such a plan. The atmosphere between the mother and son was really weird. Su Qingsang wanted to tell the truth, but judging from Hu Jinyao's expression, She felt that there was more to it than meets the eye. Thinking of Ding Qing's provocative words, she believed that Hu Jinyao was probably telling the truth. Ding Qing really wanted to seduce Hu Jinyao, but she didn't succeed. Her eyes suddenly lit up. Did Hu Jinyao want to fire Ding Qing for a long time? Was he just using her as a cover? That's enough. Old Master Hua also noticed that something was wrong. At his age, how could he not see that something was wrong with Lu Tongjia? Ding Qing was probably one of her people. He just didn't know what was wrong with his daughter-in-law. Why was she trying to push someone to her son's side? Shut up, all of you. I still want to live a peaceful life for a few days. I'll ask Uncle Cheng to prepare the meal. If you want, you can have a quiet meal with me. If you don't want it, then forget it. Hearing his words, the others stopped talking. Grandpa, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for making you worry. Hu Jinyao took the initiative to apologize. But don't worry. I'm in charge of the company. I know what I'm doing. As long as you know what you're doing, I believe that you're a good kid. I'll take care of it. Su Qingsang lowered her head and looked down. She thought about what Lu Tongjia and Hu Jinyao had been talking about and felt that something was wrong. However, her grandpa was here, so she couldn't ask. No matter how unhappy Lu Tongjia was, she didn't mention it again since old Master Hua had spoken. Besides, she did feel guilty about what had happened to Qiao Hong. For the rest of the meal, she didn't cause Hu Jinyao and Su Qingsang any more trouble. This allowed the two of them to have a quiet meal. In fact, Su Qingsang wanted to ask old Master Hua about what had happened back then. However, today wasn't a good time. She could only wait. After dinner, Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao got in the car and left. Almost as soon as they got in the car, Su Qingsang couldn't help but ask, Ding Qing, did you want to fire her for a long time? Hu Jinyao turned his face and said, Honey, what are you talking about? Didn't I fire her because you said you didn't like her? Did you? What else? Hu Jinyao raised his eyebrows with a naughty smile on his face. Su Qingsang twitched the corner of her mouth. She didn't believe a word that Hu Jinyao said. All right, honey. It's still early today. Why don't we go watch a movie? Su Qingsang was no longer annoyed by his sudden change of topic. She added coldly, Speaking of which, did Ding Qing really seduce you? Hu Jinyao put his foot on the brake and turned to look at Su Qingsang. Honey, I was just joking. Huh. I was joking too. Su Qingsang smiled at him and said, All right, we're going to watch a movie. Let's go. Yes, let's go. Chapter 554. Su Peijian looked in the mirror and painted her lips red. Looking at the mirror, he pouted his lips. After confirming that his current appearance was enough to turn the world upside down, he stood up. She put on her coat and looked at herself in the mirror again to make sure that every detail was perfect. Then she picked up her bag and prepared to go out. However, as soon as she opened the door, she ran into Xiang Kaiping. She stood at the door with her mouth open and was about to call her. Mom, what are you doing here? It's almost dinner time. Are you going out again? Xiang Kaiping looked at Su Peijian and asked carefully. Yes, I have an appointment. I have something to discuss. Xiang Caiping's lips moved, but she swallowed what she wanted to say. You haven't eaten at home for 3 days. Peijian, Mom, I really have something to discuss. It's not like I'm playing. Su Peijian blinked and looked a little aggrieved. I just came here and I'm not familiar with this place. I have to make more local friends, right? Xiang Kaiping looked at her daughter. Her appearance was gorgeous and her makeup was exquisite. Her clothes were appropriate. If not, she would still be the girl from a rich family in Lin City. She was in a trance for a moment. If she hadn't accepted this daughter as her own, what would she be like now? Peijian. What's wrong? Su Peijian's sudden seriousness made Su Peijian retract her slightly careless attitude. The joking expression on her face disappeared. What's wrong? Nothing. I just feel that you don't want to go back to Lin City. Mom, why do you say that? I'm serious. Xiang Kaiping had thought a lot about it. The more she spent time with Su Peijian, the more she thought about the months she spent with Su Qingsang. She knew it was wrong, but she couldn't help comparing it. Su Peijian didn't like her and couldn't accept her. She knew it all. Her life experience was there and her feelings and knowledge were there. Especially compared to what Su Qingsang did and now Su Peijian. She knew it very well. Su Peijian probably didn't want to accept her as her mother. I always feel that you like Lin City more. Actually, if you really want to go back to Lin City, you can. I'll beg your father and tell him to let you return to Lin City again, Mom. Su Peijian's expression suddenly changed. What are you talking about? I mean it. Xiang Kaiping didn't want to think that way, but Su Peijian was different from Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang had grown up as an illegitimate daughter of the Su family. She had never been loved by Su Qinghui or Li Qianxue. But what about Su Peijian? She was raised in the palms of the Su and Li families. What conditions did the Li family have? What conditions did the Su family have? She could not adapt now. She understood. Your father owes me something. If I go and save him, trust him, Mom? Su Peijian raised her voice. If you dare to look for him, I won't recognize you as my mother anymore. Xiang Kaiping was startled by Su Peijian's words, and her expression changed. She stood there, obviously at a loss. Su Peijian cleared her throat, realizing that she had been too aggressive. Mom, listen to me, we're fine as we are. It was true. Just the way it is now is good enough. Really? She would be lying if she said she didn't hate Su Qinghui. But she also loved her daughter dearly. Su Peijian suppressed the dissatisfaction in her heart and forced a smile on her face. Mom, listen to me. That's what we do now. We mother and daughter depend on each other. As for my father, ever since he kicked me out, I've never been able to forgive him. So, don't say anything like that again. I won't say. Xiang Caiping's expression was a little ingratiating, but it was different from when she was facing Su Qingsang. She was still a little afraid of Su Peijian. Peijian, can you stop running around outside after you're done with your work? Su Peijian furrowed her brows. She wanted to retort, but when she saw the perturbed look on Xiang Caiping's face, she didn't say anything. Okay, I got it. I've been busy lately. Don't worry. I will definitely come home more often to accompany you. Is that okay? Okay. Xiang Kaiping didn't dare to say anything else. She watched Su Peijian pick up her bag and leave. She leaned against the wall and couldn't help but think of Su Qingsang again. If it were Su Qingsang, she wouldn't just leave her like that, would she? If it were Su Qingsang, she would definitely stay to comfort her. Of course, if it were Su Qingsang, she wouldn't always run around outside. Ever since she recognized her, she stayed at home to accompany her old lady. Realizing what she was thinking, Xiang Caiping's heart felt bitter again. Her hatred for Su Qinghui was really at its peak. It was all his fault. Su Peijian didn't know the struggle in Xiang Caiping's heart. She got into the car and didn't rush to start it. Instead, she turned around and glanced at Xiang Kaiping. Xiang Caiping's words today surprised her. She actually thought that she wanted to go back to Lin City? How could she go back to Lin City now? It wasn't easy for her to get close to Hui Yifan. It was a good time. She didn't want to go back to Lin City. Li Qianxue, Su Qinghui, and even old Master Li. She said it so nicely, saying that she loved her, but in reality? Wasn't she just lying to her? If she really loved her, she wouldn't have been kicked out of the house. It was ridiculous that Xiang Kaiping still wanted to beg Su Qinghui. Other than Su Qingsang, who had stolen her status, the person she hated the most in her life was Su Qinghui. If he really cared about her, he wouldn't have told anyone about it. Wouldn't it be better to let her be the daughter of the Li family for the rest of her life? It was all Su Qinghui's fault that she was in this situation today. On this point, she and Xiang Kaiping were on the same page, which was rare. They both hated Su Qinghui. No matter how emotional she was, when Su Peijian appeared in front of Hui Yifan, she had already composed herself. Su Peijian entered the private room of Xiangshan House and smiled at Hui Yifan, who was sitting in the seat of honor. Mr. Hua, you're here. She walked up and sat down next to him. She looked around and didn't see anyone else. Why are there only two of us? Are the others not here yet? Hui Yifan picked up the teapot on the table and poured her a cup of tea. There's no one else. He moved closer to her with a faint smile on his face. It's just the two of us today. Su Peijian pursed her lips and turned to look at him. She raised her eyebrows and looked very flirtatious. Just the two of us? What do you mean, Mr. Hua? Hui Yifan put down the teapot and put his hand on the back of Su Peijian's hand. Peijian, you're so smart. How can you not know what I mean? Su Peijian gently pulled Hui Yifan's hand away and moved back a little. Mr. Hua, I told you last time. Don't treat me like the women you've met before. I'm not one of those women. Peijian, why do you say that? Can't you see how much I've cared for you these days? Hui Yifan moved closer to her again. He put one hand on the back of the chair and held Su Peijian's hand with the other. Su Peijian didn't move his hand away. Instead, she smiled. Mr. Hua, I'm really flattered by your words. Since Mr. Hua said that you don't treat me like one of those women, do you dare to go home with me to meet my parents? Hui Yifan was stunned for a moment, but only for a moment. Sun Yi smiled. Are you sure? Of course. Or do you not dare to? Su Peijian's eyes were provocative. She was beautiful, and looking at people like that would make them look flirtatious. For a moment, Hui Yifan felt a little itchy. He couldn't help but pull her up and let her sit on his lap. If you dare to take me there, I'll go. As Hui Yifan spoke, he raised Su Peijian's chin with one hand. Even if you want to meet my elders, you can. He wasn't talking about meeting her parents, but meeting her elders. That meant two different things. Su Peijian pursed her lips and looked at Hui Yifan. Her eyes flickered. Really? You don't believe me? Hui Yifan chuckled and put his big hand around her waist. Why don't you accompany me home this weekend to meet my grandfather? Your grandfather? Of course. Hui Yifan nodded. On the surface, everything in the Hua family is decided by my uncle. But if something doesn't get my grandfather's approval, I'm afraid it can't be done. Especially when it came to important matters. He glanced at Su Peijian's face and raised the hand that was on her chin again. I think my grandfather will like you very much. The reason why Hu Jinyao could get more points was because he married Su Qingsang and caught the old man's eyes. It was just a woman. If Hu Jinyao could make the old man happy through a woman, he could naturally do it too. What if your grandfather doesn't like me? Su Peijian lowered her head slightly, and his hand happened to touch her lips. She looked up at him and opened her red lips slightly. Just like that, her brightly painted red lips bit his finger. Hui Yifan narrowed his eyes. If it weren't for the inappropriate occasion, he would have taken this woman right now. As long as I like you, that's enough. Su Peijian smiled. Her lips that were gently biting his finger opened slightly. Then I really have to go see your old man. That's good. I won't let you down, right? Hui Yifan narrowed his eyes and watched her lips move away. Without thinking, he pulled her body closer, lowered his head, and kissed her heavily. Su Peijian didn't let him refuse. She raised her hand and put it around Hui Yifan's neck. As soon as her lips opened, she took the initiative. Hui Yifan's eyes flashed with surprise. More than that, he was pleasantly surprised. He had subdued Su Peijian. The kiss between the two of them was like a competition, and it all depended on who would admit defeat first. After all, Hui Yifan was a veteran in love. In the end, Su Peijian lost. He hugged her body tightly and pressed her waist down. He let her feel the fluctuations of his emotions at that moment. Although she couldn't stand that kiss and withdrew first, he didn't completely win. Peijian. Sooner or later I will make you mine. Chapter 555. You don't believe me? I do. Su Peijian looked at Hui Yifan's face. To be honest, Hui Yifan wasn't bad looking. Most importantly, she liked the ambition in his eyes. However, I feel that in the end you might become mine. Really? Why don't we wait and see? Hui Yifan was more and more interested in Su Peijian. No problem. Su Peijian smiled brightly. She thought of something and found it funny. Su Qingsang, aren't you relying on the Hua family? I'll let you know now. You're not the only one who can marry into the Hua family. I can too. I don't know how much the Hua family will be stirred up by the two of us. I'm looking forward to it. Achoo. After dinner, Su Qingsang, who was browsing Weibo in the living room, sneezed. Hu Jinyao turned to look at her. Are you not feeling well? Did you catch a cold? I don't think so. Su Qingsang touched her nose and felt that the sneeze was a bit strange. You don't? I think you caught a cold because you took care of me 2 days ago. Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang's face and couldn't see anything wrong. Why don't you stop going to work tomorrow and rest at home? You're exaggerating. Su Qingsang glanced at him. I think my mother misses me. I'm going to call my mom later. I don't have anything to do. Why should I rest? Meeting Hu Jinyao's disapproving look, Su Qingsang couldn't help but laugh. Don't always think of me as a woman like a doll. I'm in good health. Last time you were sick, I took care of you for so long and slept in the same bed with you. I was fine, wasn't I? Hu Jinyao suddenly approached her and said, Honey, are you asking for credit? Can't I ask for credit? Su Qingsang raised her eyebrows and joked with him. After that day, she didn't ask about Lu Tongjia again. To her, since Hu Jinyao didn't want to talk about it, she wouldn't ask. She didn't want to ask old Master Hui either. Because she thought of another possibility. If what Lu Tongjia said was true, what should she do? Why did Hu Jinyao have nightmares all these years? After all, he was only 12 years old. If he had done something wrong or said something wrong in a moment of desperation in order to save his own life, Wouldn't it be understandable under such circumstances? That day old Master Hua looked like he wanted to say something. Did that mean something? Old Master Hua actually knew whether it was possible or not. However, she had already lost 2 grandsons. She didn't want to lose Hua Jingyao as well. After understanding these things, he had these worries in his heart. Su Qingsang didn't want to ask any more. No matter what choice an underage child made in that kind of situation, she thought it should be understandable, right? Could they all be forgiven? She could understand Lu Tongjia's stubbornness. So let's leave it at that for now. She looked at Hua Jingyao and put that matter aside. He did not mention that matter at all. She didn't mention it and neither did Hua Jingyao. The 2 of them didn't mention that matter, but they felt much closer to each other. Just like now. Hua Jingyao put his mouth close to her ear and said in a low voice, "Then honey, how do you want me to thank you?" Su Qingsang felt the heat of his breath brushing against her ear. She shrunk her neck a little. To be honest, Hua Jinyao's masculinity was fatal. Especially when he was talking to her in such a low voice. "Stay away from me. I'm afraid I can't." Hua Jinyao put one hand around her waist. "Speaking of which, I'm really lucky. I've married such a good wife. How can I not get closer? Don't you think so?" Su Qingsang blushed. She put her hands on Hua Jinyao's chest and said, "You haven't recovered from your cold yet. Aren't you afraid that I'll infect you?" Hua Jinyao kissed her on the lips as if he was teasing her. Because of his playful attitude, Su Qingsang couldn't help but bite his lips. This bite ignited the fire. Hua Jinyao picked her up and put her on his lap. "Honey, if you really catch a cold because of me, then you can't blame me." As he spoke, he had already picked up Su Qingsang and walked towards the bedroom. Su Qingsang sat in the car, feeling a little flustered. This feeling came out of nowhere. She subconsciously raised her hand to cover her heart. "What's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" Hua Jinyao drove the car. The Hua family's old house was not far ahead. Su Qingsang's expression suddenly changed. He sped up and drove into the Hua family's house. After parking the car, he turned around and looked at her with a worried face. "Did I really infect you with a cold?" "No." Su Qingsang shook her head gently. "I don't know why, but I keep feeling flustered." "Flustered?" "Yes. I just feel like something is going to happen." It was such a strange feeling. Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao and said, "Do you think something will happen?" What could happen? He had already driven Ding Qing away. Now all the people he could use were people he trusted. Hua Yifan had recently negotiated a good project. The contract was about to be signed, and he was almost in a position to do whatever he wanted in the company. His vice president seemed to be more powerful than Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao saw it but didn't say anything. Some things really depended on who could laugh in the end. As for other things, what else could there be? Su Qingsang had just called Li Qianxue yesterday. The company was getting better. She didn't hear anything from Li Qianxue. Nothing. Maybe I'm thinking too much. Let's go. Let's get out of the car. As Su Qingsang spoke, she reached out to push the car door open, and the 2 of them entered the house together. Not long after they entered the house, a Bugatti Veyron also drove in. That car was Hua Yifan's. Today the Hua family was all here. Hua Mingguang's family, Hua Mingliang's family, and Hua Mingmei's family were all here. Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao weren't the first to arrive. When they entered the house, Hua Mingmei's family was already sitting on the sofa in the living room. When she saw Su Qingsang, the corners of Hua Mingmei's mouth twitched, and an obvious look of disdain flashed across her eyes. However, she had been warned by old Master Hua recently, so her emotions flashed quickly and were almost invisible. Wei Siming and Wei Sihai wouldn't take the initiative to make friends with Su Qingsang. They were usually close to Hua Manzi. Speaking of which, they could be considered Hua Mingliang's group. Hua Mingliang and his wife, Nian Chuanya Hua Yang, and Hua Manzi sat on the other side. Su Qingsang glanced around and didn't see Hua Yifan, but she didn't care. The Hua family's gathering wasn't always full. She went up and greeted the elders one by one. When facing Lu Tongjia, Su Qingsang's expression was still indifferent. Lu Tongjia didn't like her, but she didn't always have to warm up to them. It was rare that Lu Tongjia was easy to talk to. She didn't say sarcastic words like the previous few times. However, Su Qingsang could feel that Lu Tongjia's expression was even more unpleasant. She seemed to have something on her mind. Her face was a little gloomy. Nian Chuanya had been talking to her, but she didn't seem to hear her. Hua Mingguang and Lu Tongjia were sitting together, but there was almost half an arm's length between them. This was also impossible in the past. Could it be that there was something wrong with the couple? She subconsciously glanced at Hua Jinyao. Hua Jinyao gave her a look, signaling her to leave it alone. Of course Lu Tongjia didn't look good. After all, her plan had been ruined by him. Ding Qing had left, and Lu Tongjia didn't have anyone she could use. She had never wanted to be Wu Ziqian before, and she had never placed people in Tianyu group. If she only relied on Hua Mingguang, he would consider the big picture no matter what he wanted to do. Hua Jinyao didn't do much. He just asked someone to more or less tell Hua Mingguang about Xiao Hong. It was true that Hua Mingguang doted on Lu Tongjia, and it was also true that he had feelings for Lu Tongjia. He didn't even stop Lu Tongjia from hurting Hua Jinyao. But it didn't mean that he would let Lu Tongjia do whatever she wanted. There were too many variables in selling the company's secrets, even if it was a lie. What if Xiao Hong wasn't reliable? What if he took the company's secrets and went to a rival company? This time Hua Mingguang didn't want to help Lu Tongjia. After throwing a tantrum in front of Lu Tongjia spent a lot of effort to pacify Lu Tongjia. However, Hua Mingguang obviously didn't intend to forgive her. The atmosphere between the couple was very low and everyone could see it. However, Hua Jinyao said not to interfere, so Su Qingsang didn't care. The two of them chose a seat near Old Master Hua and sat down. There was no one else sitting next to Old Master Hua. That seat had always been reserved for Hua Jinyao. He took Su Qingsang to sit next to him and the others were used to it. However, Hua Manzi couldn't hide the jealousy in her eyes. They were all children of the Hua family. Why did Old Master Hua only love Hua Jinyao? In terms of contributions to the company, her two brothers should have done a lot, right? Hua Jinyao was already used to those people's gazes. He talked to Old Master Hua and didn't care about the others. Su Qingsang sat next to him and occasionally said a few words. Then she heard Uncle Cheng say that the second young master was here. The second young master was Hua Yifan. He arrived later than usual. Su Qingsang didn't have a good impression of Hua Yifan, so she was sitting with her back to the door. Hearing Uncle Cheng's words, she politely turned her head to look behind her. "I'm sorry. I'm late." Hua Yifan apologized, but the expression on his face was one of pride. "I'm sorry. I should have come earlier, but today is a special day. I have someone to introduce to Grandpa, so I went to pick them up. I was delayed on the way. Grandpa, please don't take it to heart." He seemed to be holding someone's hand and walking inside. He was quite tall. The figure was blocked behind him. Su Qingsang didn't see the person's face at first glance. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.